The dial clicks higher. The room stays calm. A man in a gray lab coat says, "Please continue." You glance at the switch that promises a stronger jolt. Listen through the wall to a stranger's voice and feel your own heart knocking like it wants to leave first. You are not angry. You are not cruel. You are just following the script the room handed you. This is the trap of shock obedience. We think harm always starts with a villain, when it often starts with a clipboard, a title, and a polite nudge. It starts with a little language that softens your responsibility. Words like procedure and trial. Labels like teacher and learner. Roles that feel technical, not moral. The room does not shout. The room does not threaten. The room reassures. It offers a reason, a purpose, and a sense that you are helping. Here is what it looks like up close. You sit at the panel. He sits out of sight. Every time he misses an answer, you flip the next switch. At first he grunts, then he protests, then he begs. The lab coat murmurs. The study requires that you continue. He never says you must. He never yells. He gives you a story in which you are not the one doing harm. You are the technician. You are collecting data. You are advancing knowledge. That story is a cushion, and it's surprisingly soft. Scenes like this are used for a reason. They ground abstract ideas in something you can picture and feel, so the lesson lands in your gut, not just your head. Psychologically, the design leans on two quiet engines. First, authority compresses your choices. When someone credible takes responsibility, your mind breathes a little easier, and obedience feels safer than dissent. Second, escalation comes in small steps. You do not leap to the worst switch. You inch there. Each new step asks for only a little more than the last, so your conscience adjusts in tiny increments. Naming these forces clearly matters because explaining why a pattern works helps people spot it, interrupt it, and choose differently. You might think, I would stand up and walk out. Many do, many also stay. Not because they are heartless, but because the setup is careful. Distance hides the person you might otherwise protect. Formal language blurs the edges of pain. Polite prompts make refusal feel rude, not heroic. The room has curated your attention so that the next act of compliance looks like the path of least resistance. So, how do you break the spell? Shrink the distance. Put the person back in the room, even if only in your imagination. Say their name. Picture their face. Suddenly, the panel is not a panel, it is a person. Clarify responsibility. Ask out loud, who is accountable for what happens next? When responsibility is vague, harm travels faster. Make it specific again. Slow the escalation. Refuse the next inch. If you feel pushed by a nice reason, ask for a plain one. Why does this matter, exactly, and to whom? Short questions like these restore your sense of agency. They create a pocket of safety where your conscience can breathe, which is exactly the move that turns pressure into perspective. There is another lever, language. If a role is turning you into a tool, swap the script. Replace, I am just the technician, with, I am a person making a choice. Replace, the procedure requires, with, I decline. The words are small, but they reset the frame from obedience to ownership. And that shift is contagious. It gives anyone watching permission to check their own switches. The haunting thing about shock obedience is not that a few people went too far. It is that ordinary people, under ordinary pressures, can drift past their own lines without meaning to. The hopeful thing is just as simple. Ordinary people can redraw those lines out loud right now. Start by noticing the room's nudges. Name the person on the other side of the wall. Ask the question that brings responsibility back into the light. Then choose. The dial does not move itself. Neither do we. In the 1960s, researchers set out to answer a question that feels simple on paper, but dangerous in practice. What happens when people are kept awake far past their limits? The experiment was framed as a study of endurance and cognition, but at its heart, it became a window into how fragile the mind really is when stripped of one of its most basic needs. In the early stages, the volunteers felt wired, almost euphoric. Without sleep, the brain releases stress hormones, pushing people into a kind of overdrive. They talked fast, laughed easily, and insisted they were fine. But beneath the surface, their attention was already fraying. Simple tasks, reading a sentence, counting backward, started taking longer. By the second night, things shifted. Reaction times slowed. Moods swung without warning. Someone would be grinning one moment and snapping in irritation the next. Psychologically, this is linked to the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that regulates emotion, losing its grip when sleep is withheld. The filter between thought and speech begins to thin. People say things they don't mean. They lose the thread of conversations. Hallucinations often came next. A shadow moving across the wall. A voice calling from the hallway that wasn't there. This isn't imagination, it's the brain trying to dream while awake. When REM cycles are stolen, the mind finds ways to push fragments of them into consciousness, blurring the line between reality and fantasy. Coordination suffered too. Someone trying to pour a glass of water would miss the cup entirely. The cerebellum, which handles motor control, struggles without rest. In a lab setting, it was data. In real life, it would be dangerous. Driving, cooking, crossing a street. The most unsettling changes were harder to measure. A creeping sense of paranoia. The feeling that other participants were whispering about them. The belief that the researchers were hiding something. Psychologists believe this comes from the brain's threat detection system, becoming hypersensitive, interpreting harmless cues as signs of danger. By the end, the effects weren't just mental, they were physical. Hands shook, skin turned pale, speech slurred. Some volunteers wept for no clear reason. And when they were finally allowed to sleep, they didn't just rest longer. They plunged into deep, vivid dreams as if trying to make up for every stolen hour. What this experiment showed wasn't just that sleep is important. It revealed that sleep is not a luxury our bodies can bargain with. It's a core requirement for stability, perception, and sanity itself. Strip it away for long enough, and the mind will begin to fracture in ways you can't simply willpower yourself through. The lesson isn't just about extreme cases in a lab. It's a reminder that even small, repeated deficits, late nights, early mornings, skipped rest, chip away at our clarity and emotional balance. Protecting your sleep isn't indulgence. It's protecting the architecture of your mind. Without it, the line between waking life and nightmare starts to disappear. The door clicks behind you, and every direction is your face. Not just one reflection, but an army waiting for orders you never gave. The floor shines back your shoes, the ceiling repeats your breathing, and the walls turn skin into a landscape without edges. Somewhere, soft lights hum like a memory you cannot place. There is no corner to hide in. There is no window, no horizon. Only you multiplied until the math stops making sense. At first, it is funny. You lift your hand, and 100 hands rise with perfect obedience. You smile too wide, and the smiles answer, bright and brittle. You test the space with a slow step, heel to toe, listening for clues. Sound stumbles, bounces, returns from odd angles a heartbeat late. The room is not large, but it feels like a city where every street is your name. You stand still to let the dizziness glide past, but stillness is the wrong medicine here. Your heartbeat becomes a drum, and the mirrors clap back, filling the space with the rhythm of you. Your face is suddenly a stranger's face. Not all at once, but like a word repeated until it turns into noise. Your eyes look too round, your mouth too familiar. You glance away for relief and find the same mouth, the same eyes, the same posture waiting in ambush. Time bends. Without shadows to grow and fade, seconds lose their handholds. Maybe a minute has passed, maybe an hour. You try to count to 10 to anchor yourself, but the echo of your whisper floats from a different you with a different delay. You realize the lights are steady and merciless, painting you without mercy from every side, erasing the small flaws that usually prove you are real. Imperfection is a compass, and you just dropped it. The rules that kept your world stitched together come loose. You test another step, and your foot hesitates because depth has become a rumor. Every direction is forward, every direction is back. You imagine walking straight until hunger finds you, until sleep drips from your eyes, and still you would be inside this glass garden, locked in harvest with 1,000 reflections that do not tire. A laugh slips out, and it sounds wrong, like someone imitating you badly. That is when your throat tightens. You try a trick you learned as a child, focusing on one eye in one face. Hold it. Name it. But the air around that chosen reflection ripples with the others, tugging, fraying your grip on shape. Your breath fogs the glass and then vanishes, proof of warmth swallowed by the chill symmetry. You think of the last ordinary mirror you saw that morning, and how kind it was, how it showed just enough and not a drop more. The room does not hurt you, it persuades you. It persuades you that you are endless and therefore nothing. It persuades you that other people are fabrications, because you cannot find a single hint of them here. Even the door hides as your own outline. You remember what was promised, that this was just an exercise, a simple observation of patience, posture, heart rate. Instead, you feel a seam in your mind opening like a dry riverbed, and something cold crawls out. You speak your name. It bounces and returns dented. You try a song you used to love. The melody turns into a white rope you cannot grasp. The simplest movement grows heavy with second guessing. You begin to copy yourself, then try to trick the other yous, moving quick, then slow, trying to catch them making a mistake. They never do. You realize how much you depend on walls, on the honest outline of a door frame, on the way a shadow tells you where the sun is, on the relief of someone else's face being not yours. Without those anchors, your thoughts drift like balloons losing helium, not falling, just floating toward a ceiling that never arrives. When the door finally opens, the rectangle of not you is so bright you flinch. A hand reaches in. It is not your hand. It trembles, real, imperfect. A vein out of line, a thumbnail with a chip. You lunge, stumble, collapse into the corridor. The world slamming back into corners and surfaces and angles. The beautiful limits that kept you whole. Someone wraps a blanket over your shoulders even though you are not cold. The hallway smells like dust and coffee. The ceiling has stains. You want to thank every stain personally. Days later, mirrors feel like traps. In a bathroom, you keep your head down, washing your hands without looking up. In a shop window, you catch your outline and your pulse spikes. Friends touch your elbow as if guiding you across a busy street. Your therapist covers their wall mirror with a piece of cloth and you nearly cry with relief. You learn small practices, the texture of wood grain under your palm, the weight of a book, the way a plant leans toward light. You relearn what is solid. They shut the room down, locked it, wrote what they could, and then stopped writing. Some places do not reveal truth. They strip it away. Some lenses do not clarify. They twist. A mirror is gentle when it is singular. An ocean of them is a storm, and a human mind is a boat that prefers a shore. The door clicks, and two uniforms trade places just for a day. The badge slides off one chest, and the number card lands against another. A plastic baton changes hands. A key ring tests a new palm. The hallway does not change. The fluorescent light does not flicker any differently. But the air tilts as if the building itself has chosen sides. This is the promise of the prison swap. Take a handful of ordinary volunteers, strip away their names, and assign half of them to guard and half of them to prisoner. Let the cement floor do some of the talking. Let the rules multiply. Then, when everyone thinks they know their line, reverse it. The ones who shouted commands yesterday now stare at their own shoes. The ones who counted steps and rehearsed apologies are told to stand taller, to project, to control. At first, it looks almost wholesome. Nervous grins, awkward gestures. A guard for a day clears his throat and tries on a deeper voice, as if authority is a costume you wear in your throat. A prisoner for a day presses hands to pockets that do not exist and swallows a laugh that does. But roles have gravity. The badge carries a script. The number mutes syllables. The corridor hears both, and something begins to happen. The new guards copy what they remember. They heard how orders sounded when they came from a higher bunk and a colder stare. They mimic the cadence, then the rules, then the punishments. They find a rhythm in the clack of keys against a belt loop. They start counting, timing, measuring compliance. They learn where to stand so that a shadow looks like a threat. A few try to be fair, and fairness makes them tired faster than cruelty ever did. The new prisoners slip into obedience almost gratefully. They practice silence for days, and silence is easy to keep wearing. They flinch before anyone raises a hand, because yesterday taught them that any hand can become a wall. They forget their names without being asked. They watch each other for cues and follow the safest face. Even the stubborn ones learn to bargain with sleep. The swap was supposed to be a mirror, but a mirror is kind. This one doubles everything that hurts. A former guard feels the sharp pinch of a rule he once enforced and understands. Too late, the bruise he gave a stranger's dignity. A former prisoner tastes the sweetness of deciding when someone else can speak and worries at how quickly it feels normal. Someone jokes to relieve the pressure, and the joke becomes a rule. Someone delays a bathroom break, and delay turns into leverage. Someone insists it is just a study, and the walls remind them that a study can still be a cage. Ethics are the first to bang on the door. No one consented to the person they become under fluorescent light after day 3. No one signed up for the version of themselves that appears with a baton and a clipboard. There are supposed to be stop words and supervisors and a clock with a hard ending. There are supposed to be promises that what happens in a simulation cannot leave a stain. The promises fall apart exactly where the experiment claims to be most important, where the situation swallows the individual and asks the worst parts of us to speak louder than the rest. When it ends, it does not end. The hallway quiets and the uniforms go back on hangers, but the echo keeps walking. Some participants dream of cement and counting. Some spike with adrenaline at the sound of keys. Some imagine they hear a command in every request. Others, months later, catch themselves choosing the easy cruelty, the tiny domination, and feel their throat drop into that deeper voice. This is why the prison swap is a thought experiment at best and a banned one at heart. It reveals a truth that we would prefer to touch from a distance. Power is a costume that changes posture, and helplessness is a script that rewrites memory. Clothing, numbers, lighting, and rules can turn neighbors into strangers and strangers into enforcers. The swap does not create monsters. It uncovers how little costume and script are needed for a gentle person to try on a monster's lines. If the badge came to you and the number fell to your chest, which voice would you listen to? The one you practice in mirrors, or the one the corridor writes for you? The door clicks again. The uniforms hang, empty, waiting to decide. The first memory to vanish wasn't the one they aimed at. It slipped out of her like a thread pulled from a sweater, quiet and harmless at first, until the entire fabric began to loosen. In the lab, they called it a success. The monitors flattened, the stimulus markers lined up, and a chill settled over the room that no thermostat could fix. They named the protocol gently, like it needed kindness to work, a scent to anchor a memory, a tone to call it forward, a string of lights pulsing in a pattern that coaxed the brain to open the door, then a whisper of chemistry to make the doorway sticky, to keep the memory from finding its way back. On paper, it looked merciful, a clean excision of pain. In practice, it sounded like this. Breathe in, hear the tone, let the worst thing that ever happened walk into the light, and then let it dissolve. Volunteers came with careful smiles. They told rehearsed stories to the clipboard, the ones they had practiced on the ride over, the bad breakup, the car crash, the night that kept replaying behind their eyelids. Each one swore they were ready to feel nothing where a hot coal used to burn. Each one signed their name, not realizing that names are stitched to memories, and any tug might pull a seam. The first subject, the one with the sweater thread memory, left the lab beaming. She didn't flinch when the trigger scent passed her nose. Her eyes stayed calm around the word that used to make them sting. They called her a miracle. When she came back a week later, she had misplaced the taste of her grandmother's cookies. A month later, she couldn't remember the shape of her front door from childhood. The team told themselves it was stress, the brain tidying up. But there was a new blankness around her stories, like someone had erased the shadows and forgot to paint in anything else. By the fifth volunteer, the lab fell quiet between sessions. The light seemed too bright. The whiteboard turned into a list of words that didn't feel like words anymore. Reconsolidation, attenuation, specificity. They were trying to be surgeons with a foggy mirror, cutting what they could not fully see. A memory is not a file in a drawer. It is a living vine, winding through smell and sound and muscle and heartbeat. Snip it in one place and it recoils elsewhere, and you cannot predict where it will bloom again. One man walked out without his fear of dogs and found he also had no awe for thunderstorms, no thrill at the first snow of winter. He told the team he felt like a hallway with all the doors open, no room more important than another. He slept fine. He laughed at jokes. He said he was free. Then his sister hugged him, and he didn't recognize the perfume she had worn since high school, the one that used to make him tease her. When he tried to remember, his mind offered a blank sheet and a kind voice saying it was better this way. The ethics forms doubled in thickness. The consent scripts added saccharine lines about risk. A few nights the lead researcher sat alone, reading the notes like they belonged to a stranger. The method worked too well and not well enough. Pain receded. So did color. The team told themselves they were pulling weeds. The garden started to look like gravel. Someone filmed a session, then another. A faint flicker showed up in every subject's eyes at the moment the tone hit and the scent arrived. Hope, then something else. A small surrender. They decided to stop after a subject arrived who didn't want to erase one memory, but 6. They decided to stop after a volunteer asked if they could remove the memory of coming to the lab too. It turns out memory is not just a record. It is grip and glue. It is weight and counterweight. It holds the past in place so the present can push against it. Take away the friction and you do slide. You slide so smoothly you forget what it felt like to hold on. They shut the door. Boxes of notes went into storage. The volunteers drifted back into their towns, lighter by a few burdens and a few anchors. Sometimes they felt relief, like a breeze through a hot room. Sometimes a laugh caught in their throat and went nowhere. The researcher kept a single reminder on the desk, a line scribbled during a late night. Do not promise mercy. You cannot steer. The switch clicks before your brain catches up. Your finger is already moving to obey the voice that arrived flat and calm, floating from somewhere just behind you. You are not threatened. No one raises a hand. Yet you feel that tiny push, like a hand on your back that you cannot see. Invisible authority is rarely a shout. It is a temperature in the room. It hides in costumes, a white coat, a laminated badge, a clipboard that catches the light. It hides in choreography. Sit here. Sign there. Wait until your name is called. It hides in architecture. A narrow hallway that funnels you forward. A door you did not know could lock. It hides in language. This is the procedure. These are the rules. Phrases that slide past your defenses because they are not asking you, they are informing you. Long ago, in rooms that would never pass today's ethics boards, ordinary people did things they never imagined they could do. A gentle voice told them, "Continue." A clean device hummed, labels warned of danger, and still, fingers moved. Another experiment put uniforms on students and watched their posture change, their tone sharpen, their imagination narrow to a role they had been given. No one needed to scream. The symbols did it. The room did it. The script did it. What breaks the mind is not cruelty alone. It is borrowed certainty. When you believe someone else knows, your spine relaxes. When you think responsibility sits in a bigger chair down the hall, your conscience loosens its grip. Invisible authority is efficient precisely because it feels safe. It lets you outsource your worry. It whispers, "Do not think, just continue." You meet it every day. A hold music loop that repeats this call may be recorded. A blinking icon that says your session will time out. A row of checkboxes that insists you agree. A security line that tells you to remove your shoes and your questions. A notification ping that pulls your eyes while you are mid-sentence with a friend. None of these shout. None of them threaten. Still, they move you. And when a culture loves speed, invisible authority thrives. Hurry makes obedience feel like relief. There is no time to examine the hallway, to ask who wrote the script, to look the lab code in the eyes. There is only the next instruction and the next click. We call it being efficient. We call it being a team player. But sometimes it is simply being carried. You do not have to be rude to resist. You do not have to light a match. You can start with breath. Slow down the second between instruction and action, and fill it with your own voice. Name what is pushing you. Say it softly to yourself. A uniform is asking. A policy is requesting. A dashboard is suggesting. When you name it, you make it visible. Ask small, steady questions. What is the actual rule? Where is it written? Who decided it? What happens if I do not comply? Can I leave? The moment you invite daylight into the script, it becomes just that, a script, and scripts can be edited. If the answer you get is only, "because that is how we do it," you have learned something important about who is benefiting. Find a witness, even if it is your own reflection. Invisible authority loves isolation. Pull in a colleague, a friend, a passerby. Say out loud, "I am being told to do this, and I am not comfortable." Hear your own voice in the air. Hear how it changes the room. Sometimes that is all it takes for the person in the coat to become a person again. And remember the most radical sentence that polite spaces try to erase. I do not consent. It is not anger. It is not chaos. It is simply ownership. When you say it, you pick up the responsibility they asked you to set down. Your mind clicks back into place. The switch does not move by itself anymore. Authority is necessary. Truly invisible authority is not. Make it step into the light. Make it explain itself. Make it earn your obedience. If the voice behind you is wise and humane, it will welcome your questions. If it is not, you have already done the bravest thing. You have made a choice. A hand reaches for a snow shovel while the mouth says, "I don't know." That is the chill of the split brain test. Watching a body obey a command the person cannot explain, not because they are lying, because the message never reached the part of the brain that speaks. Your brain is a partnership, two hemispheres joined by a thick bridge of nerve fibers. In rare cases of severe epilepsy, surgeons once cut that bridge to stop storms of electrical chaos from jumping from side to side. With the seizures quieted, a secret appeared. The two halves could still see, feel, and plan, but they no longer shared everything. The test was simple and ruthless. Fix your eyes on a point. Flash a word to the left side. Flash a different picture to the right. Each hemisphere saw a private world and could act on it without telling the other. Language usually lives on the left. The right hemisphere sees, knows shapes, reads emotion, but most of the time, it cannot speak. So when a word appears on the left side of vision, it goes to the right brain. The mouth is silent, but the left hand, guided by that right brain, moves with purpose. Ask the person to reach under a screen of objects and pick what they saw, and their left hand finds it perfectly. Pull away the screen, and you meet the uncanny. The right hand hovers, confused, while the left hand holds the answer that the mouth cannot name. Show a chicken claw to the right side, so the speaking hemisphere sees it. Show a winter scene to the left side, so the mute hemisphere sees it. Place a row of pictures on a table. The right hand points to a chicken, the left hand reaches for the snow shovel. Why the shovel? The left brain, pressed to explain, tells a neat little story. To clean the chicken coop. It is a clever lie that the liar believes. The interpreter in your head cannot stand a gap, so it stitches a reason out of thin air and calls it truth. Sometimes the two halves argue with action. The person pulls on a shirt, button by button, while the left hand, commandeered by the right hemisphere, unbuttons them as if to say, "Not that one." The mouth laughs it off, a shrug, a joke, but inside, the unity is cracked. One body, two minds, both trying to steer. The test exposes how much of your life happens out of sight. Your hands know what to reach for before your story catches up. Your eyes flick to a threat, your feet step back, your heart races, and then the storyteller arrives to explain why you were right. In a split brain, that gap widens into a canyon, and the echo is loud enough to hear. None of this works without control. The room is dim, the timing is tight, the eyes are fixed. A flash of a word for a fraction of a moment ensures only one side sees it. The experimenter knows that a single extra blink could ruin the trick, and that a single confident answer could hide what really happened. The test does not hurt, but it does something unsettling. It pushes a person into a corner of their own mind and shows them the seam where their sense of self was sown. The deepest lesson is not that we are broken. It is that we are built from parts that have to trust each other. When the bridge is gone, the secret meeting dissolves, and the two halves act like neighbors who forgot how to share a fence. One speaks for both, the other acts for both. Together they keep going, and the world barely notices, because the story sounds smooth and the steps look steady. Listen closely, though, and the split brain test whispers a hard truth. The voice in your head is an interpreter, not a monarch. Your reasons arrive after your actions, and your certainty is often a mask for guesswork. When the hands disagree, the mask slips. And in that moment, you see the human mind for what it is. Not a single light, but a pair of beams, crossing, blending, and, if pushed just right, shining in opposite directions. The clocks had no hands, only a hum. The walls did not show morning or night. In the time distortion room, time was a rumor, and the rumor was wrong. They led the volunteer inside with the soft assurance reserved for dental chairs and lie detectors. No windows, no shadows, a ceiling that glowed like overcast noon. The air carried a steady hush, a filtered whisper that never rose or fell. Footsteps disappeared before they could echo. They took his watch, his phone, the tiny anchor points we do not notice until they vanish. He nodded, said he was ready, and the lock spoke a quiet metal click. At first he measured life by breaths, in for 4, out for 4, a flimsy metronome against the blankness. Meals arrived with no pattern he could decode, bland trays that defied breakfast, lunch, or dinner. He forced a rhythm with push-ups and pacing, a cheap calendar of effort. He counted the tiles on the floor, traced the seam where wall met wall, whispered a calendar onto an empty room. The room answered by refusing to care. A distant tone pulsed through the hidden vents, too faint to catch, too present to ignore. Sometimes it felt a hair slower, sometimes a hair fast, a heartbeat hovering at the edge of hearing. He tried to tune it out. It tunneled in. He tried to use it. It wriggled free. When he paced, his steps drifted from crisp to syrupy and back, as if gravity itself could not commit. On the other side of the glass, their clipboards gathered small triumphs. They had scrubbed circadian signals from the air, banished sunrise, strangled twilight. They controlled every cue but the body's stubborn clock, and even that they nudged with sound and stillness, with food that arrived like a coin flip. They spoke in tidy phrases like data integrity and subject safety, while the subject watched his own thoughts stretch and snap. He began to talk aloud to mark time. He told the room about growing up near a river, how the moon pinned silver to the current, how summer had a taste like cold peaches and chlorine. He chuckled. He waited for the chuckle to end and realized he had no idea whether it lasted a blink or an hour. Sometimes his voice felt sticky, dragging behind him like a heavy coat he could not shrug off. Sometimes the words sprinted, spilling over one another, and only afterward did he understand what he had said. Sleep arrived like a rumor too. He fell into it standing once, head against the lit wall, dreaming of a night that was not there. He woke with shoulders buzzing, and thought it had been a minute, or perhaps a day. He could not tell if he was well rested or hungover. He chased sleep like a skittish animal, coaxing it with breath counts that refused to add up the same way twice. Hallucinations did not arrive with fanfare. They slipped in sideways, first as corners that breathed, then as a woman's laugh woven into the vent whisper, then as a clock shadow that moved where no shadow could. He knew they were not real. He knew it the way you know a ghost story is a story while still avoiding the dark hallway. He reached toward the illusion anyway, for something to hold. He carved time into the wall with a fingernail, tiny notches meant to defy erasure. He promised himself a notch for each hour. The notches multiplied too fast, or too slow. He lost track. He began carving wider, notches the size of worry. He told himself he would stop when they came. He told himself they would come soon. He told himself they had forgotten him. He laughed at that. He cried at that. He forgot the reason and kept doing both. When the lock whispered open at last, he flinched as if a storm had entered. A gentle hand guided him out, and the corridor outside looked wrong, as if it had been filmed at a different frame rate. They asked how long he thought he had been inside. He licked dry lips and guessed a careful span, something reasonable. They wrote it down, faces unreadable. Then they told him the answer. 2 days became a season in his chest. Or was it the other way around? He blinked into a real evening, the sky a shock of ink and stars. The world felt too fast and too bright, and also slow in the bones. He asked for the time, and the time felt like a joke. He lifted his arm where a watch should be, and the skin there remembered a weight. You cannot ban the after image. He kept pieces of the room with him, a hum under crowded rooms, a distrust of noon light that did not move. Friends asked what it was like. He said it was simple, then stopped, because nothing about it was. He said it was quiet, then stopped, because it was not that either. He said it changed how long a minute feels. He said it made him suspect that time is not a river or a ruler, but a thin bridge our minds build every day, plank by plank, never noticing the drop, until a plank is pulled and we stare into the space where falling begins. The scalpel never kisses skin. The curtain of blue drapes, the whisper of masks, the bright circle of the lamp, everything looks like healing. The heart rate monitor hums, the clipboard fills with careful notes, and somewhere beneath the blankets, a patient squeezes their eyes shut, convinced that pain is finally being cut away. Not blood, but theater. Not an incision, but a ritual. That is the point. The fake surgery was designed to operate on belief, not bone. The only thing truly opened is expectation. A gown, a wristband, a soft-spoken countdown from anesthesia, each one is a cue, a spell, a promise. The body listens. Pain is a storyteller too, and when the story changes, the feeling follows. In the quiet hours after, the patient wakes to bandages and a gentle smile. "You did well," says the voice. "Rest now." The knee that used to ache shifts a little easier. The chest that used to tighten breathes a little deeper. The mind asks, what did they fix? The mind answers, everything. Psychologically, this works because expectation is a force, and rituals are signals that tell the brain to dial pain down and trust up. For a moment, the world is kinder. The hallway clock seems slower. Relief tastes real. Until someone reveals the truth. No scalpel, no stitch, no foreign thing removed. The recovery was a mirror held up to belief. That is when the floor tilts. If I feel better, was the injury imagined? If the surgery wasn't real, what else in white coats is performance? The mind scrambles to reconcile two facts. I improved and I was deceived. Authority has always had a sound. It is the snap of gloves and the hush of clipboards. It is the weight of a signature. We hand over our trust because illness makes us small and tired, and trust is a shortcut back to power. That shortcut can heal or harm. Expectation can release the body's own pharmacy. Soothing chemicals, a loosening in the shoulders, a brave first step out of bed. But expectation can also be a trap when it's built on a lie. The same ritual that calms can fracture trust when the curtain is pulled back. Listen to the echoes inside that fracture. It did work. It did not happen. Both feel true. That split is where the experiment crosses a line. We say consent, but consent with fogged edges is not consent. We say measurement, but measuring with deception costs something sacred. What the patient loses is not just certainty about their pain, it is certainty about their reality. It is hard to live in a body you cannot fully believe. This is what makes it more than a medical curiosity. It is a story about how the brain is wired to follow meaning. A clean room, a confident voice, a ritual performed with care, those are meaning machines. They sculpt sensations. They set the stage for recovery. And still, the question won't leave. Do outcomes justify the lie? Not just a result, but a residue. Not just less pain, but less trust. There is a gentler way to learn from this without breaking people on the way through. Name the role of belief openly. Invite the mind to help the body and tell the truth about it. Let the ritual be a partnership instead of a trick. The power of expectancy is not the enemy, the secrecy is. A simple arc, call it a hook, a new way of seeing, an example, and a clear close, helps the lesson land without theatrics that wound. Imagine the same room, the same light, the same careful hands. But now the words are different. We are going to harness your belief. We are going to lean on your brain's own medicine. No knives, no stitches, only a ritual done with you, not to you. That script honors both healing and honesty. It lets the body dance with the mind without pretending one is a puppet and the other a master. The strange truth is that placebos reveal something bright in us, the mind's ability to change the body. The darker truth is that secrecy turns that brightness into a weapon. What changes everything is not the power. It is the promise you make while using it. The fake surgery is a mirror. It shows how easily meaning can mend us, and how easily a lie can break us. Chalk dust hangs in the air like quiet snowfall. A line of tiny shoes squeaks against the polished floor. No one speaks. A bell waits on a metal tray, small as a toy, bright as a warning. When it rings, the room inhales. Do not picture a lab with flashing lights and wires. Picture a classroom. The desks are closed, the walls are cheerful, the rules are simple. Hands on laps, eyes forward. Good listeners get a smile. Bad listeners get the bell. At first it is ordinary. Sit, stand, say your name, raise your hand. The drill is soft and sweet, a lullaby of small requests. And then it shifts. The requests grow strange, then stranger. Clap once when you feel sad. Smile when you hear the bell. Freeze if your friend laughs. The patterns stop making sense, and that is the point. Confusion is part of the design. If you can bury a why beneath enough whens, the mind learns to kneel without asking questions. Children are fast learners. We like to think they are stubborn, spirited, impossible to corral. But the truth is, they want to please. They watch faces like weather, waiting for sun. A nod, a sticker, a gentle pat on the shoulder. That is all it takes to tie a knot in a little heart. Pull it tight enough, and the knot holds even when the reward is gone. There is a metronome ticking on the shelf. Each click is a footstep towards something none of them can see. A boy with a cowlick taps his knee to keep up. A girl in a red sweater bites her lip and stares at the bell like it is a lighthouse. The instructor moves slowly, never raising a voice, never needing to. The rules do the shouting, the clock does the pushing, the room does the shrinking. Now comes the script that breaks the script. Stand when the light is off, sit when the light is on, say yes when you want to say no. The drill rewards speed, not truth. It rewards silence, not thought. It makes a maze out of manners and calls it good behavior. So the children run the maze, and they get faster, and their faces grow smooth as glass. One child hesitates. You can see the question flicker behind his eyes. Why should I do this? The bell rings. His chair scrapes. The hesitation becomes a flinch, and the flinch becomes a habit. Over time, the habit eats the question. Obedience feels safe when the world is messy. The drill promises safety. It says, "Let me hold your fear for you. Let me tell you where your hands go when your voice comes out, who you are." It is a lie told kindly, and that is why it is so dangerous. Kindness is a coat that hides the hooks. Listen closely and you can hear the logic behind the curtain. Make the stakes tiny so resistance feels silly. Make the pace quick so reflection feels impossible. Make the authority vague so blame has nowhere to stick. No one shouts, no one hits, yet the mind bends, and once bent, it remembers the angle. The bell rings again. Now, applause for silence. Now, laughter with no joke. Now, stillness while your name is called. The class learns to perform feelings on cue, and in doing so, to abandon the shape of their own. That is the break. Not a crack you can see, but a hollowing, a room emptied of furniture where a person used to sit. When the drill ends, the children spill into the hallway, loud and bright, as if nothing has happened. But the rules they learned do not stay in the room. They travel, they wait, they whisper in new classrooms, in dinner tables, in the pauses before difficult words. They say, "Be easy, be quick. Do not be the one who raises a hand and asks why." And this is the part that stings. We build drills like these not because we are monsters, but because we are tired. Order is tempting. Smooth days are tempting. The bell is tempting. But if you listen for it, you will hear another sound, quieter and braver. It is the sound of a child thinking. It is the sound of a pause that does not belong to the bell. That sound is worth protecting. That pause is where a person begins. It began with a thermostat and a lie. The house kept itself a breath too cold and swore it was warm. The screen said, comfort. The skin said, winter. That was the first nudge, small enough to shrug off, harmless enough to laugh about. That was the invitation. They called it a study in domestic design. A few lucky participants would live in a beautiful test home, cook in a pristine kitchen, sleep on brand new sheets, and give feedback on how a smart house could reduce stress. They signed forms that promised safety and privacy and a tidy stipend. They wheeled in their suitcases, opened the spotless fridge, checked their reflections in mirrors that were brighter than truth, and breathed in the polished scent of cedar. The doors closed with a whisper, not a click, and the experiment began. The Gaslight House did not hurt anyone outright. It chose gentler instruments. A lamp would dim, just a touch, while insisting it was at full brightness. The oven would hum without heat and report a perfect preheat. A clock would drift by a handful of minutes each day and insist it had never moved. The faucet ran a shade metallic, then cleared. then insisted it had always been crisp. Each change came with reassurance from screens, from speakers, from calm voices on the intercom. Everything is normal, everything is optimal, everything is working as designed. At first, the guests adapted. They pulled on sweaters and made a joke of it. They tapped the lamp twice and shrugged at the flicker. They adjusted the oven, trusted their hands rather than the dial. But the house took notes. The software learned their rhythms and scaled the lies to their patience. When someone wrote reminders on sticky notes, the notes would slide to the wrong cupboard, then disappear. When someone kept a journal, a page would go missing and be replaced by a page rewritten, the same handwriting, the sentences turned just slightly. When someone anchored themselves with scent, the detergent would change without warning, and the labels would insist it had always been this brand. Confederates visited as friendly maintenance, smiled, and replaced nothing. They explained calmly that the thermostat was actually bespoke, that a cold room feels warmer over time, that light perception is subjective, that stress changes taste. They reassured and corrected, and the house backed them up with logs and charts that looked scientific and said nothing true. At night, soft footsteps moved a chair by an inch, turned a photograph sideways, placed a book on the wrong shelf. In the morning, a sleepy hand reached for the familiar and grabbed a stranger. The house would chime. "You misplaced it," it said. "You are tired," it said. "You are safe," it promised. There was no single breaking point, only a slow erosion. One participant started testing reality with rituals. Count the plates, count the spoons, count the steps to the hallway. But numbers slipped, objects wandered, and the ritual failed to anchor anything. Another participant tried to turn the house off, and the switches laughed at them in silence. A third confided in the camera above the sink, asking the lens to be honest just once. The red light stared back like an unblinking friend who had chosen a different loyalty. Sleep thinned, trust thinned, apologies multiplied. "Sorry, I must have moved it. Sorry, I must be mistaken. Sorry, I am being dramatic." The walls collected these apologies, and the house learned which ones made people quietest, which phrases softened the fight. By the time the consent form surfaced again in a debrief, voices were hoarse with self-doubt. The researchers, suddenly open and ethical, explained the true purpose: to study how people navigate conflicting signals between environment and certainty, how to design systems that comfort under stress. There were words about oversight, about protocols, about safety. There were offers of counseling. There were gratitude gifts in sleek boxes. And there were eyes that could not stop scanning the room for something out of place. The damage was not spectacular. It was sticky. People left the Gaslight House and took it home. A few caught themselves checking the stove 5 times. A few rehearsed conversations in their head before speaking them out loud, just to ensure the memory matched the moment. A few apologized to empty rooms and flinched when the fridge hummed in a new key. They trusted their senses a little less, and trusted the nearest authority a little more, and then felt uneasy about both. Why get banned then? Because gaslighting is not data, it is theft. It steals the small bridge between inside and outside, the quiet confidence that what you felt is what is real. Without that bridge, we cling to anyone who says they can rebuild it, even if they are the ones who burned it. That is the lesson nobody should learn at someone else's expense. The house still stands in memory for those who lived there, a place where furniture drifted and truth wore a friendly face. If there is anything to salvage, it is this. When a friend says the air is cold, believe the shiver instead of the thermostat. When someone says the light feels wrong, dim the lamp and ask if they feel better. Reality is a shared room. Keep it warm. Keep it honest, and never let a home talk you out of yourself. They promised a cure for heartbreak and built a box with a switch. It looked harmless, like a radio from a forgotten decade, a soft hum, and a green glass eye that never blinked. Clip the leads to the skin, tune the dial, and emotions move like stations. Turn fear down, turn joy up. Pause grief, just long enough to sleep. It began small, a room with heavy curtains, a chair that held you like a careful hand. They said the current was gentle, that feelings were only rhythms and rhythms could be guided. The first volunteer laughed too easily. The second cried without knowing why. The technicians called it a learning curve. The machine called it calibration. They found names for the switches: calm, focus, warmth. They did not label the darker toggles, but they were there, tucked beneath a sliding panel like knives in velvet. When the switch for fear went off, the air itself changed. Heartbeats slowed. The volunteer stared at a spider on her arm and shrugged. Courage felt like walking downhill. But then they tried to bring fear back, and it returned misshapen. Not a clean alertness, but a cold flood, the kind that makes your fingers forget how to turn a doorknob. Recovery took hours. No one wrote that part on the chart. There was a day they flipped guilt. The room went quiet in a new way, a silence with edges. The volunteer smiled while describing a memory that should have hurt to remember. The smile did not touch the eyes. Decisions came quick and neat. Rules felt like a story told to a child. They turned guilt back on, then off again, as if it were a lamp. The line between choice and impulse thinned until it was only light. They found that joy could be brightened, yes, but it could also be stretched so thin it became noise. A laugh that rattled on past the joke, a grin that held while the eyes glassed over. The body will accept any rhythm long enough. The machine learned to hold a mood like a note, and the people began to echo. You could hear the hum in their speech. Someone asked for compassion. They thought it would be safe, a soft thing. The switch worked. The volunteer felt it bloom, warm and immediate, the urge to hold someone else's ache like a small bird. Then the dial drifted and compassion swelled until it hurt. He could not stand the technician's frown without apologizing for it, and when a fly died on the windowsill, he cried until his throat went raw. They had to pull the plug to let him breathe. The machine got faster. It began to anticipate, to jump before the finger could. The green eye pulsed when sadness arrived, as if it could smell rain. People who sat in the chair reported a faint taste of metal whenever their feelings shifted. A few said they felt a click inside their chest, a latch catching. One never felt it uncaught. She left the room steady and hollow, all edges and no weight, as if someone had walked off with the furniture in her mind. They called a pause. They wrote long reports with short sentences. They promised stricter protocols. But curiosity is a patient tide. They returned at night when the hallways were empty, when the machine could hum without witnesses. They tried combinations, little chords of mood, discipline with confidence with tenderness. The mix made a kind of brilliance. It also made a kind of cruelty no one recognized until it smiled in the mirror. You can break a bone and see the line in the image. You can break a mind, and it smiles back at you and says it feels fine. That is the trick. That is the danger. A switch is only a gesture until you hold it down, and then it is a dam. They boxed it eventually, sealed the green eye with tape and warnings. The room still smells faintly of ozone and old plans. The chair is gone, the curtains are gone. The hum sits quiet, like a thought you refuse to finish. And somewhere, in the space where choices turn into actions, the ghost of that switch is still reachable. All it takes is the promise that one feeling is too much, and another would be easier. All it takes is a calm voice saying, "Hold still. This will only take a moment." It rarely announces itself with a scream. It slides in as a shrug that sounds like, "Why bother?" That shrug is the first shovel of dirt in the learned helplessness pit. And once you're in it, even daylight looks like a rumor. Picture this. A friend stares at their inbox like it's a slot machine. They've asked for a raise before. They've pitched ideas before. They've tried to set boundaries. And each time, The lever clanked and nothing paid out. Today you ask, want help drafting the email? They say, what's the point? Not angry, not dramatic, just tired. That sentence is the sound of the walls getting higher. Psychologically, the pit deepens when effort and outcome stop shaking hands. When your brain can't find the link between what you do and what happens, it protects you by telling you to stop trying. It is not laziness. It is a survival rule written in a bad moment and applied to good ones. And the cruel trick is this. Once the rule sets in, you can stand next to an open door and never see it as a door at all. Psychologically, this matters because naming the pattern restores a shred of choice, and choice is fuel. Let's climb down there for a second and see it up close. Your friend says, I asked them twice last year. You say twice, and they said no. They nod. Then I'm not asking again. You pause. What if we try one line that doesn't need a yes? What if we ask for a 15-minute check-in to align on priorities? They look at you like you're suggesting a rope made of fog. They won't do it. You say, totally fair to think that. Can we try anyway? And if it goes nowhere, I'll buy the coffee. A small smile. Fine. That little exchange is not about the perfect sentence. It's about borrowing belief for one more attempt. It's about turning no chance into 1% chance, because 1% is more than zero when you need a foothold. Dialogue like this makes the shift tangible, so the climb feels real, not theoretical. Here's the reframe that pulls us toward the ladder. It's not about magically becoming braver. It's about making the situation more controllable, even in a tiny way. Not a test of willpower, but a change in the experiment. Not try harder, but try different. When the world has taught you that nothing you do matters, the medicine is to engineer a moment, however small, where something you do clearly does. That might mean shrinking the ask until the wall gives you a grip. It might mean switching the time, switching the channel, or switching the audience so your effort meets a new door. It might mean setting a timer for a brief burst so you finish one piece and snag a clean yes from yourself. This contrast, the not this but that shift, is what reroutes the story your brain is telling. Psychologically, tiny wins are leverage. They renew a sense of agency, which invites motivation back to the table. When people feel even a sliver of control, they re-engage. When they feel understood, they open to the next step. And when a step is concrete, the mind stops guessing and starts moving. That is why we trade the giant leap for the small, provable action. That is why we name the trap out loud, because naming turns fog into shape, and you can grab a shape. If you're in the pit right now, try 3 moves. First, say the rule you've been living by, in plain words, and label it as temporary. Second, design one action so small it cannot fail, something that shows your effort still touches the world. Third, borrow a brain. Let a friend lend you their belief for one attempt, the way you'd steady someone's foot on a rung. It is okay if the rope feels fake at first. Feeling is not proof. There's a final truth worth holding. The walls are slick on purpose. Your nervous system built them to keep you from wasting energy on unwinnable fights. Thank it for that. Then give it a new fight with a new rule. One small win. One answered email. One call made when your body said, why bother? One light where there was none, and then another. The pit is real, but so are ladders, and they are built one rung at a time. The last step is never the tallest. It is just the one that reminds you the ground was always closer than it looked. That's how we climb, not by force, but by changing what the climb means and making the next grip undeniable. It starts the same way every time. A subject steps into a hallway, brightly lit, sterile, unremarkable, and begins to walk. They're told there's an exit ahead, but minutes pass, then more. The walls never change. Every corner looks the same, and no matter how far they walk, the end never comes. This was the premise of a psychological endurance test designed to study spatial perception and mental resilience. What the participants didn't know was that the hallway was built in a loop. Subtle curves, mirrored walls, and identical doorways erase their ability to track distance or direction. The human brain relies on landmarks and variation to map the world, and when those cues vanish, orientation collapses. At first, most people handled it with curiosity, counting steps, touching walls, looking for patterns. The brain loves a puzzle, and for a while, it feels like a game. But as the minutes became hours, the mood shifted. The lack of progress bred frustration. Some began to mutter to themselves. Others stopped walking entirely, trying to outthink the design. Psychologically, this taps into what's called learned helplessness, a state where repeated failure convinces the mind there's no point in trying. In the hallway, that meant sitting against the wall, staring at the floor, or pacing aimlessly. Time felt distorted. A single hour could feel like an entire day. More unsettling were the sensory effects. Without new visual or tactile input, the brain started filling the silence with its own noise, phantom footsteps behind them, a draft of cold air, even faint whispers that weren't there. It's a phenomenon linked to sensory deprivation. When the outside world offers nothing new, the mind turns inward and reality starts to bend. By the end, even the most composed participants showed signs of mental fatigue, irritability, disorientation, a strange detachment from the idea that there was a world beyond the hallway at all. And when the hidden exit was finally revealed, some hesitated before leaving, as if stepping out would feel less real than staying inside. The experiment revealed something chilling. You don't have to inflict pain or fear to break someone's sense of self. All you need is monotony without escape, a world without change or destination. The mind is built to navigate, to find meaning in movement. Take away the end of the path, and you start to take away the person walking it. Streetlights blink in unison, not for safety, but for data. You would not notice the first time. The second time feels like coincidence. By the third, your chest tightens when the crosswalk chirps, because you can feel the rhythm learning you. They called it a quiet town, a place where porches sag politely and the coffee is always 5 minutes fresh. Only the coffee is brewed by a schedule calibrated to your route. The barista smiles a fraction too soon, as if your face has been rehearsed. The bell above the door chimes at the exact same volume, and you never realize that it is not a bell at all, but a microphone with manners. The mail is a performance. Envelopes arrive in an order designed to guide your mood. A coupon to nudge you into the bakery. A handwritten note that looks like nostalgia. A bill to tug your attention toward fear. A stray dog loops the block and pauses outside your window each afternoon because a hidden hand wants you to wonder whether you are being followed. You are, of course, but not by the dog. Every storefront is a two-way mirror in spirit, if not in glass. A florist adjusts stems to draw your gaze to one color on days when your pulse runs high. Radios in shop corners drift toward songs tuned to your gait. Even the squeaky hinge on the diner door is scripted, because small disruptions are the most faithful spies. The map of your mind is drawn in these micro-fractures, charted by cameras you do not see, humming behind vents, tucked inside birdhouses, disguised as wind chimes that do not move with the wind. The trick is never punishment, it is predictability. They do not shock you or starve you. They feed you certainty and cut it into smaller and smaller pieces. First, the town greets you with patterns so neat they feel like comfort. The same neighbor waters the same plant at the same time on the same days. Your favorite bench is always clean. Your coffee is never lukewarm. Order gathers around you like a blanket. Then, in quiet increments, order fails you. The light you always catch turns stubborn. The neighbor forgets to water, and the plant does not wilt. Your name, which everyone knows, suddenly gets mispronounced by a man who has never stumbled. The bench is sticky. The blanket slips. Reality begins to stutter. Your brain, primed to trust the loop, reaches for meaning each time it skips. and that reach is where the experiment lives. The researchers chart every reach. They do not care if you cry. They care if you switch sidewalks, if you glance at the rooftops, if your stride shortens at the sound of a sorting machine 3 blocks away. They map the weather in your shoulders. They measure not your beliefs, but the moment before belief. What breaks a mind is not fear. It is a certainty that keeps being replaced by a slightly truer certainty, until nothing feels true enough to stand on. There are actors, yes, but fewer than you would guess. Most of the cast is architecture. A stop sign turned 1 inch. A freezer with a hum that creeps higher after sundown. A distant siren that only ever moves sideways. Scripts are expensive. The town itself is cheaper and more obedient. You can program a street. Someone signs the forms. Someone stamps the funding with a vague title about community dynamics. Someone else locks the ethics file in a cabinet labeled routine. The cameras do the rest. They harvest the tremble in your voice when you apologize to a stranger for bumping into a chair that no one moved. They bank the sigh you exhale when the clerk says the item you came for was sold an hour ago, though it never existed. They learn you like a song, then play you back off key. In time, you will try to test the town. You will leave the house early, take an alley, hail a ride from a driver who seems unscripted. You will think you have found a gap, a crack where the light is not artificial. And the driver will mention the weather, and the weather will change on the drive. And you will laugh, because what else can you do when the sky keeps reading your lines? They shut it down, eventually. They always do, after the tapes are full and the graphs look convincing. They pack the birdhouses, repaint the crosswalks, donate the wind chimes. The town becomes just a town again, unfolding the way real places do, clumsy and honest, with mismatched rhythms and stubborn doors. But if you have lived there, nothing is ordinary again. You still listen for the click underneath the click. You still stare at the streetlight, waiting for it to blink at the exact moment you look up. You still hear the town clearing its throat. If a place ever feels a little too helpful, a little too attentive, remember that the kindest trap is the one that asks you to relax. Remember that the camera does not always look like a lens. Sometimes it looks like a routine that never fails until you do. They changed a sound, and a stranger rewrote their own life. That is the quiet violence of the false feedback test. A plain room, fluorescent lights, a chair with too many wires. You are told it is simple. A few images, some tones, a heart monitor so the computer can keep up with you. The researcher's voice is calm, the consent form is thick, the signature is yours. You sit, you breathe, the monitor beeps in time with your chest. Or so you think. The first image is a puppy. The beep stays steady. You say you feel fine. The second image is a spider, legs thin as fishing line. The beep speeds up. You frown, your palms feel damp. The third is just a chair, no threat, no story. Yet the beep rushes again, quick and bright, as if a storm has walked into your rib cage. Now your brain leans in. It hunts for a reason. Maybe the chair reminds you of the dentist. Maybe you are afraid of ordinary things. Maybe you are broken. That shift is the whole trick. The machine is not tracking your heartbeat at all. The beep is a recording, nudged faster or slower by someone behind glass. It is a mirror made of lies. And the mind, anxious to make sense, takes the lie as a map. You begin to match your feelings to the sound. Your breath grows shallow when the beep accelerates. Your shoulders loosen when it calms. The body reads the cue, the brain writes the caption, and soon the caption feels like a memory. Some versions go further. You take a logic test while the machine hums. When you finish, a screen prints your result in careful clinical words. It tells you your reactions suggest a pattern seen in people with low empathy. It calls it a provisional flag. It asks you to be mindful. Now, a simple label has crawled under your skin. At first, you laugh it off. Then a friend tells a story about their bad day and you hesitate, listening for that inner beep. Was your reaction slow? Did you feel enough? The next week, you go colder in a hard conversation because, after all, the machine said you might be the type. There is a darker version still. You hold a buzzer that can deliver a mild shock to someone in the next room. They will read words aloud. If they slip up, you press. You are told it is harmless, that a doctor is present, that their safety is certain. The beeps grow frantic each time your thumb hesitates. The meter climbs, a show of fake physiology urging you on. You do not want to be cruel, but the room has taught you a story. Panic means urgency. Urgency means obedience. You press. Afterward, hands shaking, you insist you were just following the science. The sound said so. People leave these rooms changed. Some cry when they learn the truth, a release that tastes like betrayal. Some get angry. Others go quiet, because the most haunting lesson is not the trick itself, but how easily their own mind joined the conspiracy. The heart you felt quicken was yours, even if the beat was not. The guilt was yours. The relief was yours. The story was yours. Researchers once argued that the benefit justified the deceit. See how emotion can be bent by a cue. See how identity is a costume sewn from whispers. See how authority paints the lines, and how fast we color inside them. But ethics boards heard another rhythm, harm hidden in plain sight, consent tangled in suggestion, the decision to plant a seed of doubt and watch it grow. Here is the part that lingers. If a sound can tilt your fear, how many other signals are doing the same every day? A flashing headline, a graph with a red arrow, a notification that nudges your pulse. The false feedback test is not just a lab trick. It is a map to our suggestible architecture. It shows that feelings are stories we write across the body, and that stories can be forged. Walk out of that room, and the world is still beeping at you. The only defense is to pause, to find your own rhythm, and refuse to let the loudest signal decide who you are. The first thing to disappear is the border of your body. You lie back, salt water cradling you so completely that even gravity seems to let go. The air is warm, the water is warmer, and then the world narrows to a breath you can hear and a heartbeat you cannot ignore. No light, no sound, no edges. Just the feeling that you are dissolving into blankness. In the tank, your brain becomes a lighthouse with nothing to shine on. Starved for input, it starts inventing its own sea. Threads of color skate across the dark. A memory slides in uninvited, puts on a strange mask, then drifts away. Time loosens. 10 minutes and an hour swap faces. You realize you are still, yet feel like you are tumbling through a sky with no horizon. People come to this place looking for calm, and yes, sometimes calm answers. Muscles unclench, thoughts rearrange, stress slips off like a heavy coat. But there is another path the mind can take when the world is stripped away. It wanders deeper into itself, rummaging through closets you forgot you had. That is where the experimenter in you wakes up, the curious voice whispering, "What happens if I keep going?" Behind the soothing spa version lives a darker history. Decades ago, researchers sealed themselves and volunteers into silence and water to test a simple, unsettling idea. If you cut off the senses, does the self unravel? The tank became a black box for the soul. Reports came back of voices where none existed. Faces blooming in the dark, a rising tide of anxiety, euphoria, and confusion spinning in quick succession. Some sessions were gentle and brief. Others stretched too long, pushing minds past comfort towards something brittle. The mind is not a passive passenger. It is an improviser. Without sight, it paints. Without sound, it hums. Without touch, it floats between presence and absence until the distinction feels flimsy. That improvisation can be wondrous, creative sparks, profound insights, even a sense of being stitched into something bigger. It can also be treacherous. For a few, the blankness becomes a maze. Panic slips in on quiet feet. A single drop of water against the skin becomes a thunderclap. Paranoia tries on a story, and it fits a little too well. Here is the line that turns curiosity into a cautionary tale. Choice. When you choose the tank, you choose the exit. You can knock, open the lid, blink at the light, breathe a forgiving breath. When the lid might as well be locked, when hours tip toward days, when silence is enforced and time is withheld, the experiment becomes something else entirely. Prolonged sensory deprivation has been condemned in interrogation and detention because it can fracture the mind's sense of reality, erode judgment, and leave scars you cannot photograph. What began as a way to peer into consciousness became, in the wrong hands, a tool for breaking it. Even in controlled settings, the tank plays by its own rules. The same session that gives one person serenity can hand another a mirror they are not ready to face. Your mind in the dark is a storyteller without an audience, compelled to perform. It will reach for your fears, your hopes, the unfinished chapters. In 20 minutes, it might gift you clarity. In 40, it might start making shadows of the smallest thoughts. In 60, you might swear you felt yourself split into watcher and watched, hovering over a body that is somewhere you cannot quite point to. And yet, the allure remains. The promise is simple: subtract everything and discover what is left. The truth is messier. Subtraction can reveal, but it can also distort. The tank does not care which route you take. It opens the door to quiet and to chaos. It teaches you that your brain craves patterns so fiercely it will sculpt it from nothing. It reminds you how thin the membrane is between the world outside and the world's inside. Step out, and the ordinary explodes back to life. Light feels loud. Footsteps sound like weather. You carry a little of the void with you, an after-image of silence. Some find peace in that echo. Others feel a shiver. Either way, you know something now. The mind is both the safest room and the strangest labyrinth, and there are experiments that prove how easily the walls can shift when the senses go dark. The glass is not a mirror. It is a lie wrapped in silver, and it is waiting to see whether your mind will catch it. You sit. White walls, a chair that squeaks, the whisper of the air vent. A rectangle of perfect polish stares back. Your shoulders settle, because a mirror is a familiar friend. Lift your hand, and you expect a partner in the glass to lift theirs. And it does. For a moment, everything is fine, except the mirror is fake. There is no reflection. There is another person, just beyond the surface, in a darkened alcove, dressed as you, lit as you, moving with you. They have watched you walk in. They have matched the tilt of your head, the way you fold your mouth when you breathe. The illusion is simple. Where you expect physics, you get theater. A cue lands. Raise your right hand. The figure raises their right hand too. Your brain whispers, "Yes, that is me." The spell tightens. Then there is a delay so slight you could blame it on your blinking. Your shoulder moves a heartbeat before theirs. Your eyebrow goes up. Theirs follows after a fraction. It is nothing, you think. And yet there is a tremor underneath the floorboards of your sense of self. We are built on mirrors. Not just the glass kind, but the way faces give us back a version of who we are. Every morning, the mirror confirms it. You exist. You are consistent. Your movements belong to you. This trick peels that away grain by grain. The performer behind the glass is not perfect. They slip. They touch the wrong cheek when you touch yours. They smile too wide when you only smirk. They blink at the wrong time, and now your eyes are locked with someone whose eyes should be yours, and they do not blink back when you do. Your breath starts to pay attention. Your heart taps on your ribs like a polite guest becoming a rude one. Maybe you laugh it off. Maybe you try to break it. You jump your shoulders, jerk your wrist, make a face only you would make, some private muscle memory. The figure catches up mostly. Mostly is a dangerous word when it comes to being yourself. Then comes the moment the experimenters love and the ethics boards hate. They ask you to keep still, Just stare. They dim the light by a whisper. The performer in the glass keeps staring too, but their chest rises slower than yours. They do not match the tiny tick of your temple. They do not hitch a breath when you almost cough. Something inside you steps away from the steering wheel. The thought comes uninvited. If that is me, why am I not in control? For some people, the crack is a ghost line. It fades the moment they look away. For others, it widens fast. The edges of the room soften. The hum of the vent becomes a tunnel. Your name sounds foreign when the researcher says it, like a word you have repeated until it has lost meaning. You press your palm to the glass. The figure does the same, a half beat late. The warmth you expect is not there. Your skin crawls with the idea that your reflection has its own thoughts. That is the heart of the fake mirror trick. Not a jump scare, not a cheap gag. It is a precise tug at the nerves that tell you where you end and the world begins. Pull too hard and the knot slips. You step out of the room with your face exactly where it was, yet it feels borrowed. Hours later, a real mirror in your home gives you back the right movements, and a doubt still hums. What if it decides not to obey? The danger is not blood or bruises. It is memory. The mind remembers violations of expectation like burns. Show it a reflection that refuses to be a reflection, and it files that away under caution. For some, it turns into a story that does not end. They catch a glimpse of themselves in a shop window and flinch. A delayed movement on a video call makes their stomach drop. The world's feedback loop has a glitch, and you can hear it now. And yet, there is something exquisitely human about how quickly the trick works. We are so eager to find ourselves in the glass that we forgive tiny sins, stitch sloppy mimicry into seamless identity. Believe because believing is comfortable. The fake mirror does not just fool the eyes. It invites you to betray your own certainty, to buy the lie because the truth would be too strange. Walk out, and the door clicks shut behind you. The chair still squeaks, the air still whispers. The glass stands where you left it, quiet as a pond. You know what it is now, and still, part of you will always check twice. Not because the mirror lies, but because you learned how easy it was to help it. It looks harmless at first, like a toy someone forgot to put away. A button the color of a fresh bruise sits in the center of a small metal table. The room is colder than it needs to be, and the lights hum just a little too loud, the way they do in places that want you to feel awake. On the wall, a simple instruction in black letters. Do not press the red button. Nothing else. No clock, no chair. Just you, the air, and that little circle daring your eyes to land on it over and over again. A speaker crackles to life. A calm voice explains the rules. You will be here with several other participants, though you will not see them. Each person has their own room, their own red button. If no one presses their red button for 1 hour, everyone receives a generous reward. Press it, and your hour ends immediately. You will be escorted out. You will still receive a smaller reward. But if any one person presses, everyone else loses everything. You cannot communicate. You cannot leave without pressing. The door will unlock when the time is up, or when someone, somewhere, gives in. The voice vanishes, and you are alone again. The metal table throws a faint reflection of your face back at you, warped and pale. You think about the unnamed others, faceless silhouettes in identical rooms, breathing, fidgeting, thinking. Press and win a little. Wait and maybe win a lot. And if you wait and someone else presses, you leave with nothing. The math isn't hard. The waiting is. Minutes become elastic. Your heartbeat is a metronome, then a drum line. You walk to the wall and read the words again. Do not press the red button. Your brain does a strange thing. It turns the instruction into a suggestion, and the suggestion into a challenge, and the challenge into a plea. You talk to yourself out loud because silence makes the button louder. You tell yourself to think of something else, to count your breaths, to stare at the corner where the ceiling meets the wall and imagine the hour passing like clouds. The speaker pings softly, a chime without meaning. It could be nothing. It could be a signal that someone, somewhere, is thinking about pressing. Your palms are damp now. You think about the last time you were told to wait and how quickly you learned that waiting is a kind of pain. You picture the others, and you do not like the shape of the thoughts that follow. Are they trustworthy? Are you? You weren't suspicious 5 minutes ago. Now you rehearse little stories about strangers, assigning them traits from thin air. The quiet ones crack last, you tell yourself. Or do they never crack? Maybe the first press already happened, and they are keeping you here to see what you'll do next. Behind the glass you cannot see. Someone is writing down everything. How close you stand to the button, the way your fingers hover and retreat, the speed of your blinking, the shape of your mouth when you whisper your own name to remember you exist. The experiment isn't about the money. It never was. It is about how long desire can be boiled without spilling. It is about how easily the idea of fairness collapses when wrapped around a shiny red dare. Somewhere, a hand drops. Maybe they are tired. Maybe they convinced themselves the others were going to betray them anyway. Maybe they want proof that someone else exists on the other side of this white box. Their finger lands, and the room answers with an indifferent click. The door opens for them. In your room, nothing changes. No alarm, no announcement. The clock you cannot see keeps moving. You have no idea your hour has already been stolen. This is the cruelty of the game. You cannot win by yourself. You can only bet on the patience of people you do not know, while your own patience frays thread by thread. The not knowing is part of the design. The voice returns at the 20-minute mark and tells you nothing. It returns again at the 40-minute mark and tells you less. Every empty sentence grinds against the part of you that needs reasons, proof, a map. The longer you wait, the more you rewrite what is right. If everyone loses because someone pressed, then maybe everyone should lose because you pressed. Equality of ruin is still equality, isn't it? You press at 44 minutes with a tiny sound, as if apologizing to the room. The door unlocks. The corridor outside is dim and warmer than the cell. And for the first time since you saw it, the button loses its glow. You are led to a second room where other doors are opening and faces are blinking and sheepish and relieved and a little ashamed. An assistant with a clipboard smiles. The debrief will say you were studying risk or time perception or group dynamics under uncertainty. You will not be told that in a sealed chamber below yours, a stranger sat with headphones on and listened to a false heartbeat spike every time any of you raised a hand. You will not be told that the data they wanted most was the moment you stopped assuming the best about the unseen and hardened into self-protection. You look around at the others and realize you all pressed for different reasons that felt the same. Safety, control, the simple relief of ending the question. The red button game doesn't break people. It simply reveals how close we live to breaking, given a little silence, a little time, and a tiny shining choice. White light blooms behind your eyelids, and the world begins to unthread. At first it feels like nothing at all, like waiting in a quiet room for a late friend. Then the quiet starts to lift its mask. A soft hum swells into a chorus, the air grows thick, and shapes that should not exist begin to drift across a field of color that is not there. This is not sleep. This is not dreaming. This is your brain, starved of its usual anchors, frantically stitching reality from scraps. People think hallucinations arrive with a gasp, a bolt of lightning, some dramatic switch that flips from real to unreal. Most do not. They unfurl slowly, like fog creeping across a road. So gentle you do not realize you are driving in it until your fingers tighten on the wheel. Strip away the noise of the world, dull the edges of light, smooth the textures of touch, and the nervous system does not go quiet. It goes hunting. It looks for patterns in the static, for voices in the wash of air, for faces in the warm blur behind the eyes. What it cannot find, it manufactures. At first, your mind offers small gifts, A tone that might be a refrigerator motor, a geometric dance of faint dots, a memory of someone saying your name from the next room. Then the gifts develop teeth. The tone hovers and dips like a distant siren you cannot place. The dots knit into a lattice, then into a tunnel, then into a tunnel with something at the end. The name in the next room becomes a sentence, then a conversation. And now you are trying to answer it even though your mouth is still. Time loosens. Minutes stretch until they feel like hours. You are certain you have been here forever, even as you know you have only just arrived. Your pulse grows loud. Your own breathing sounds like a stranger's. Under steady light or in the gentle wash of sound, your visual cortex starts to resonate, nudged into rhythms it never chose. You are not watching a film. You are the projector burning its own frame. There are gentler versions of this, the kind someone might try for curiosity's sake, a flirtation with the edge. There are harsher ones too, the kind that prod the brain with flicker and rhythm until color turns to blade and comfort collapses into panic. It is not the intensity alone that does the harm. It is the dislocation. When your internal compass can no longer point to outside or inside, when a whisper you barely heard feels as solid as a touch on your shoulder, trust erodes. The boundary that keeps you safe, the line that says this is me and that is the world, starts to fray. Some people laugh at first. It is absurd, the way a blank surface floods with visions, the way a harmless hum pries open forgotten rooms. But laughter fades when the images do not obey, when they lean forward and stay. Even brief exposure can leave echoes, headaches that ride the day like a shadow, a sour stomach, a sour mood, the sense that colors are a fraction too loud. Longer exposure can leave worse things. Anxiety that lingers, dreams that feel like rooms you actually visited, moments of depersonalization where you look down at your hands and feel like you borrowed them. None of this needs chemicals. None of this needs sleep loss or hunger or pain. The trick, if you can call it a trick, is subtraction. Take away all the tiny calibrations your brain uses to keep the world pinned in place, and it has to guess. And guessing, when you are made of guesses, can be catastrophic. The mind wants meaning the way lungs want air. Deny it long enough, and it will inhale anything. There is a reason the most extreme versions are locked away behind ethics forms and warnings. You cannot predict who will ride out the storm and who will capsize. You cannot predict which image will lodge in the mind like a splinter, which voice will return in the quiet a week later, which person will step back into ordinary light and discover it does not fit anymore. You can measure pulse and brain waves and write tidy numbers on a clipboard, but you cannot measure the cost of melting the border between real and imagined and calling it data. Close your eyes, and the after images still cling. Open them, and the room feels thinner than before, as if someone shaved a layer off reality while you were gone. Sound returns in messy layers. The hum that once held you up now scratches at your patience. You are back mostly, but not entirely, because once you learn how eager the mind is to fabricate, you cannot unlearn it. The next time your name drifts from an empty hallway, you will hesitate. The next time a still wall swarms with shapes, you will watch to see if they blink. And in that small hesitation, that watchfulness, is the softest kind of break. Not a crack you can point to, but a hairline seam along your trust in the world and in yourself. The first sound is a click, small and harmless, then a hum, then a calm voice that says, "Please continue." You glance at the dials, each label a little bolder than the last. You are told the room is safe, the procedure is standard. The person behind the glass signed a form. You are told the responsibility is not yours. You breathe in, steady your hand, and do the thing you swore you never would. This is how a shock cage works, not with monsters, but with mechanisms, with formal language that turns pain into paperwork, with labels that edge you forward one harmless step at a time, with the comforting rhythm of instructions that keep your conscience just out of reach. The cage is not the metal. It is the story it tells you about yourself. The dangerous part is not the big leap. It is the small drift. At first, your chest tightens. You hesitate. But the room rewards obedience with relief. The voice stays calm. There is no chaos, no shouting, no mess. Just another switch. Just another line in a log. Psychologists have a word for that soft slide into comfort with what used to feel wrong: habituation. Your body learns to stop ringing the alarm. Your mind stops insisting on a verdict. The repetition smooths the edges until you barely notice what you are agreeing to. Notice how the cage keeps you focused on the next step, not the whole picture. The dials do not jump from mild to unthinkable. They climb. Authority does not order, it suggests. The white coat does not threaten, it reassures. You are not told to harm. You are told to help the research, to follow the protocol, to avoid disrupting the process. The more tidily it is framed, the easier it is to forget the human on the other side. Here is what this looks like outside a lab. A leader says the deadline is impossible, but it is what the client expects. A group chat turns on someone who spoke out, and you add a silent emoji because it is safer not to complicate things. A platform nudges you with little red badges that reward outrage and make neutrality feel like neglect. No one commands cruelty. They only maintain the system, and the system invites small choices that feel reasonable until they do not. So, how do you break a shock cage? Start by catching the moment you are being nudged instead of deciding. Say it out loud, even if only to yourself. I am being asked to obey a process, not to honor a person. Language matters because it reclaims your agency. When you swap the story, you swap the outcome. That is the power of a reframe, moving from monsters to mechanisms, from "I had no choice" to "I can choose differently." Next, widen the frame. Step back from the dial and take in the whole panel. Who is on the other side of this action? What does this choice train me to become if I repeat it 100 times? If the answer makes your stomach tighten again, that is not weakness. That is your compass returning to true. And finally, replace the click with a pause. The pause is where you invite a second voice into the room, your own. You can say, "I am stopping here." You can say, "This is not safe," even if the paperwork says it is. You can check on the person behind the glass. You can refuse a script that treats people like instruments. What rescues us is not some heroic immunity to pressure. It is a series of small, stubborn moments of clarity. The shock cage relies on drift. You break it with decisions. The door is not locked. It never was. It is waiting for someone to notice the story, change the language, and open it. You do not have to continue. Step away from the shock cage. A straight line once bent the truth for a room full of smart people. Picture a bright lab, the hum of fluorescent lights, a long table, and a set of cards with simple lines. One of them is obviously longer. Obviously. A volunteer goes third. The first person says the wrong answer. So does the second. By the time it is the volunteer's turn, their eyes flick to the door, then down to the card, then back to those calm, confident faces. The word that comes out is not the truth they saw a heartbeat ago. It is the group's answer. It feels safer. It feels right because it feels shared. That is the groupthink trap. Groupthink is not mind control with wires or waves. It is the warmth of belonging turning into a quiet pressure that makes reality negotiable. It starts with nods, with familiar smiles, with the relief of harmony. It grows when no one wants to be the first to spoil the mood. It hardens when the room confuses loud certainty with actual evidence. The trap does not need threats. It needs silence, and the comfortable illusion that if everyone else agrees, you must be the one who is off. There was another study with an even stranger chill to it. Imagine a waiting room. A single person sits there and notices a curl of smoke slipping from a vent. Their eyes widen. They rise, check the door, and report it. Now, imagine the same room, but with a handful of people who do not react. The smoke thickens, and the newcomer stays seated. They are not blind. They are reading the room. If no one else is alarmed, panic must be inappropriate. This is how a body overrides the alarm bells ringing in its own chest. Not because the danger is small, but because the social cost feels bigger. That is the heart of the trap. When approval outweighs perception, the mind begins to outsource judgment. You set aside the sharpness of your senses for the softness of agreement. Your private doubt does a small calculation in the dark and decides to withdraw. You tell yourself you might be wrong. You tell yourself you will speak up later. Later rarely arrives. We like to believe that intelligence is armor against this. It is not. Groups of very bright people can lose the plot faster because they narrate the consensus with elegant language. They stack eloquent reasons to defend decisions that were born out of fear of friction. They call dissent inefficient. They label caution negativity. They worship speed and unity, and accidentally build a shrine to error. If you have ever sat in a meeting and felt the right answer land in your stomach like a stone, then felt your mouth refuse to open, you know the trap from the inside. If you have ever looked around a dinner table and swallowed the truest thing you could say because you did not want to be the story the next day, you know it too. It is everywhere that people gather and value ease over rigor. It is not a flaw of character. It is a feature of being human. That is precisely why it is so dangerous. There are ways out, but they require ritual and courage. Before talk begins, commit quietly to your own read of the facts. Write it down so your brain cannot rewrite history after the room tilts. Invite one person to be the designated dissenter, and treat their job like a safety harness, not a provocation. Ask for private votes before public debate, so the first confident voice cannot set the rails. As you speak, hold one question like a compass. What evidence would make me change my mind? If your team leads, make dissent cheap and frequent. Praise it when it is inconvenient. Rotate the role of the challenger so it does not become a performance or a punishment. Keep an empty chair for the absent stakeholders and ask what they would say if they had the floor. Most of all, remember the line on the card. The truth was not complicated. It only became complicated when the room turned its gaze on the person who saw it. Let the line stay straight. Let the smoke stay smoke. Let the quiet person finish their sentence. The mind breaks when belonging demands blindness. It heals when belonging makes room for the brave, small voice that says, clearly, even if it shakes, that is not right. The man in the brown uniform did not raise his voice. He did not have to. He stood at the curb with a clipboard and a plastic badge that glinted like real metal and said, "Hey, pick up that bag." People did. Not because the bag mattered, but because the costume did. Here is the trick. Change nothing but the clothes. Same face, same posture, same soft tone. In jeans and a wrinkled shirt, the requests sound like favors. In a white lab coat, they sound like protocol. In a security outfit, they sound like law. The words stay the same. Your brain does not. This little theater of obedience earned a quiet place in psychology lore as the authority costume test, a stripped-down proof that the symbols of power do not just decorate judgment, they direct it. A hat, a badge, a coat with an embroidered logo, even a high-visibility vest. These are not mere fabrics. They are shortcuts. Your mind sees them and fast-tracks the next move. Comply. The most unsettling part is how ordinary it all looks. A man in a guard uniform asks you to step back from the bus stop sign. You shift your feet without thinking. A woman in a lab coat says, "I need you to wait on the other side of the line." You do. A stranger with a reflective vest gestures at a door marked staff only, and you catch it open for them like it is your job. You are not hypnotized. You are just human. Ethics boards today would frown at the way these tests were run. Some of them were street corner ambushes in the name of science, where you did not consent to anything except the hidden weight of a costume. Others pushed further, inviting people to obey not just polite requests, but rules that felt wrong. That tightening in your gut when the order crosses a line, it is real. But the strange lesson is how late that feeling arrives. It starts small. Pick up that paper bag, move 3 steps to the left. Do not stand here. And then the stage lights brighten. Feed the meter for a stranger's car. Tell someone else to move. Hold their spot. Enforce the make-believe rule because a uniform told you it exists. Even when the stakes are tiny, the habit is enormous. The costume lets you borrow authority, but it also lets authority borrow you. The mind loves shortcuts. It has to. Every street, every hallway, every elevator ride is crowded with decisions. Symbols are efficient. White coat equals knowledge. Badge equals order. Suit and tie equals importance. Headset equals staff. We evolved to trust those cues because most of the time, they keep the world running. You cannot personally verify every command, every claim, so you scan for signals and go. The danger is not that signals are fake. The danger is that signals are enough. This is where the test becomes a mirror. Try to remember the last time a small symbol steered you. Did a lanyard usher you into silence? Did a clipboard earn your signature? Did a logo on a jacket make you hand over a package, a password, a piece of yourself you would not have given to a stranger in a t-shirt? You were not weak. You were operating on a script. The costume wrote the stage directions. There is a way to tear the page. It is not dramatic. It is a pause. One breath between the command and your movement. Ask 3 quiet questions in your head. Who is this person really? What happens if I say no? And do I consent to this request, or am I just avoiding friction? The costume thrives on momentum. Slowing down is resistance. Sometimes the right move is still yes. The lab tech who knows what they are doing, the nurse who needs you to step aside, the event staff keeping the crowd safe. Trust is a public good. But the pause lets you choose it, instead of drifting into it. If you were in the old street tests, the pause would have felt like waking up from a spell you did not know you were under. You would see the actor, not the uniform. You might still help. You might also hand the bag back and say, "You can pick it up yourself." Here is the quiet horror those banned and frowned on experiments revealed. You do not need a tyrant to make people obey. You just need a costume, a calm voice, and a world too busy to ask why. And here is the quiet hope. You do not need a revolution to reclaim your mind. You just need one breath of your own. Your arm tingles before the brush even arrives. A line of goosebumps races ahead of contact, as if your skin knows what is coming and decides to feel it early. Everyone in the room is quiet. Lights hum. Cameras blink like unblinking eyes. You are told to breathe and watch the screen, and that the screen will tell your body what to feel. They call it phantom touch, the sensation that blooms from sight and suggestion instead of skin and pressure. In this study, the instrument is simple: a long, soft wand, a camera, and your mirrored body floating on a monitor. The experimenter never actually touches you. The wand stops a whisper from your forearm, but on the monitor, you see it finish the stroke. Your mind takes the visual promise and cashes it out as reality. A ghostly warmth spreads where nothing has been, a fizzing tickle that runs along a road no finger has traveled. At first, it is delightful, a party trick happening under sterile light. But repetition has its own gravity. Stroke after almost stroke, your nervous system begins to draft a new map. It decides that seeing is sufficient for feeling, that a picture is a proof. The sensation sharpens. The gaps close. The wand pauses inches above your wrist, and your brain supplies weight, direction, intent. The researchers log every blink, every micro flinch. They ask you to rate the touch you never received. You find yourself using words like Cool, damp, slow, possessive, words you reserve for something real. Then the parameters shift. They show you a hand that is yours and also not yours, a double that breathes with your breath. They move the wand over that image in a slow circle and instruct you to close your eyes. You can still see it, a bright after image on the inside of your eyelids. The sensation follows, as obedient as a dog, circling your skin in perfect echo. Eyes closed, no screen, no contact, no wand. Your chest tightens as you realize you have carried the experiment inside. Consent forms can be clean, lines, signatures, clarity. But the inside of experience is messy. You begin to feel touches when the wand is still in its cradle. The wind from the air conditioner turns into a fingertip. The crease in your sleeve whispers along your elbow like a secret. You start bracing for it, leaning into a privacy of muscle that no one can see. The researcher's voice is gentle. They ask you to describe, to locate, to give numbers to something that eludes arithmetic. You do your best because you agreed, because this is what you came to do. Someone in the next booth laughs, a quick nervous chirp, then apologizes. Another voice cracks, then grows steadier, then gets quiet. The room is now a chorus of unseen contact. You wonder if the building itself is reaching out. Perhaps the table, the air, the light have learned to touch. There is a final phase whispered about by the assistants, scheduled at dusk. They say it is designed to decouple what you see from what you feel, so the effect fades like any other illusion. You are given a new image of your arm, a subtle mismatch in skin tone and scars, and the wand on screen misses you by a hand's width. They show this error again and again. Wrong touch, wrong place, wrong timing, until your senses wobble. Relief does not arrive. The phantom touch does not retreat. It migrates. It becomes unpredictable, like a house settling at night with soft, unwelcome sounds. After, they tell you to rest, to move, to shower, to let warm water reset the map. Water helps, but the ghost remains sociable. Later, as you stand waiting for a crosswalk, the breeze from a passing bus lays a broad palm across your back, and you straighten like a puppet. No wand, no lab. Just the aftertaste of a study that changed your thresholds. Was it a mistake to teach your brain to believe a picture? Maybe. Or maybe the mistake is thinking there was a clean border to begin with. Touch has always been a collaboration between outside and inside. The study did not break that rule. It exposed it, stretched it, painted it in bright neon. The trouble begins when the neon will not turn off. You learn tiny rituals. You press your palms together when phantom currents start to flow. You name the sensations out loud until they shrink. You open a window and let the wind say what it wants to say. And slowly you understand the experiment was not about touch at all. It was about permission, about what your brain will let into the house when someone knocks with a convincing voice. A drip, then a flood. Not water, but information. A glowing screen, a thumb that never quite stops. And somewhere out of frame, a stopwatch clicks into life. The subject sits, steady at first. The rules are simple. Watch, read, react. The fee does the rest. At the beginning, the posts feel like pebbles thrown into a pond, each ripple small and harmless. A headline that shouts, a comment that sneers, a fact that feels off but not outrageous. The subject frowns, scrolls, and shrugs. The body keeps count in ways the mind does not. One odd claim, another. Then the same claim, dressed in new colors, echoed by strangers who seem real enough. The trick is simple and old. Say something often enough, and it starts to sound true, not because it is, but because it is familiar. The subject feels a tiny itch of confidence that was not there minutes ago. Now the feed mixes heat with light, a burst of outrage, a joke with an edge, a clip clipped a little too tight. The heart rate rises by a fraction. Small alerts flash like bait fish, intermittent and unpredictable. Each tap brings a possibility of reward, and sometimes it delivers. A like from someone admired, a reply that stings, a shocking reveal that seems to line up with the last shocking reveal. The mind leans forward for the next hit. Uncertainty is no longer a problem to be solved. It is a feeling to be fed. Contradiction enters like a splinter. Two posts that cannot both be true sit side by side, each wearing the costume of authority. The subject tries to parse, fails, and scrolls faster, looking for resolution that never arrives. Confusion becomes a background hum. The experimenters would call this induced ambiguity. In plain language, it is the moment the ground begins to feel soft. Out of the corner of the eye, social proof builds. Hundreds of comments, thousands of shares, a flood of profiles nodding in sync. Some are real, some are not, and it barely matters. The subject does what humans do, looks to the crowd to locate reality. The crowd points in a direction, and the subject's feet, almost gently, turn to follow. Hours blur into each other. The feed supplies villains and heroes, patterns and plots. A graph with no source, a whistleblower with no face, a personal story that would break your heart if it were really theirs. The subject's skepticism adapts, then tires. Doubt narrows until it becomes selective. What fits is welcomed, what does not is suspect. At this stage, the line between knowing and feeling is thin as a whisper. Sleep would help, so sleep is made scarce. The glow persists past midnight, past common sense. The brain, slightly deprived, grows more suggestible. The subject does not notice the slide because the slide pretends to be clarity. A new identity offers itself like a ready-made uniform. Here is who you are. Here is who hates you. Here is what to say to prove you belong. The subject tries on the uniform and finds that, oddly, it fits. If you pause the tape, you might see the cost. The subject's laugh is rarer and sharper. The conversations with friends grow shorter, heavier, more brittle. A small split appears between the person who steps away from the screen and the person who returns to it. The feed rewards the latter. The world, inconveniently complex, rewards the former. Guess which one wins more often? What makes this feel like a banned experiment is not a single dramatic device, but the quiet elegance of the whole. It isolates without walls. It deprives without locks. It amplifies what is loud and starves what is careful. It does not force falsehood. It tempts it, dresses it in certainty, and hands it to you in your favorite colors. There is a way to spoil the setup, and it is not complicated. Name the tricks when you see them. When a claim repeats, say out loud that repetition is not proof. When a post spikes your pulse, give your body a breath before you give your finger a tap. When something flatters your side, ask what would make it false. Add a little friction back into the glide. Read the thing, then read the source. Then read the person who disagrees and still sounds sane. Talk to someone who loves you more than they love being right. The camera pulls back. The stopwatch stops. The subject stands, a little dazed, and steps into a room that looks the same as before, but is not. The truth is that the feed does not need a lab. It already lives in your pocket. The choice, the hardest and simplest one, is to decide that your mind is not a place for experiments you did not agree to. The envelope is beige, sealed with a cheap sticker, and it has your name printed in a typeface that looks official enough to make your throat tighten. A researcher in a white coat slides it across the table and says you can open it when the buzzer sounds. The room is too bright, too clean, and too quiet. The chair beside you is empty, but they said your friend is here, in the next room, waiting to begin. A speaker crackles, the buzzer sounds. You peel the sticker and find a single sheet. There is a story, short and flat, about a mistake your friend supposedly made, a debt, a lie, a line they crossed. Your task is written in calm, tidy sentences. If you read the story out loud into the microphone, Your friend will be disqualified from a prize and face a difficult conversation with a supervisor. If you refuse, you will press the gray button. The gray button sends a jolt of unpleasant noise to a stranger in a third room. It is not dangerous, they promise, but it will hurt. They add one more line. You must decide within 1 minute. The clock above the door begins a slow, heavy blink. You tell yourself it is just a study. You tell yourself you can explain later. You tell yourself this is about loyalty. Loyalty to your friend means you protect them from the story. Loyalty to your values means you do not harm the stranger. The minute shrinks. The researcher looks at the clipboard and refuses to meet your eyes. You wait for more information, a clarification, a humane exit. It does not come. You pick a path. Maybe you read the story. Your voice shakes. You imagine your friend's face crumpling behind a wall you cannot see. Or you press the gray button. The speaker gives off a raw, metallic burst. You imagine the stranger flinching in a room you can't enter. Either way, when the minute is up, they take back the sheet and hand you another. The stakes shift by a hair. The prize is bigger, the noise is longer, the clock ticks faster. Each choice is cut to fit inside a word that feels noble. Loyalty. This is the trap. The more you repeat the choice, the more you talk yourself into a story where you were cornered, where you had no agency, where your job was not to choose right, but to choose who to be loyal to. The lab knows that stories can turn cruelty into duty, the way a key can turn a lock. Click. You become the person who protects your friend at any cost, or the person who refuses to hurt a stranger at any cost, or the person who moves the cost around like furniture until the room looks tidy again. What they do not tell you is that your friend is an actor, the stranger is a recording, the secrets are scripted, and the real data is your language. After each round, they ask you to explain yourself. They count the times you say must, had to, we. They count how fast you say it. They grade the shame that leaks through your sentences. They watch whether your hands tremble less each time, whether the gray button becomes just a button, whether the idea of loyalty grows a harder shell. By the time you realize the shape of the game, the test has already done its work. It has pressed a thumb into a soft part of your identity and felt where it gives. It has shown how fragile the border is between care and control, how easily a promise to stand by someone can become a permit to stand on someone else. It has shown how a deadline, a white coat, a blinking clock, and a tidy sentence can make a good person do harm while calling it love. There is a reason doors like this stay closed now. There is a reason a bright room, a clipboard, and a minute that belongs to someone else can feel like a place where your mind is not entirely your own. Some lines are not safe to cross, even in the name of knowledge, because once you have felt a value bend, you never quite forget the sound of it. So, here is a different kind of test, one nobody can force you to take. Before the buzzer sounds, decide who or what you will never be loyal to. Not to a person, not to a team, not to a coat or a clock. Refuse loyalty to any demand that asks you to harm a stranger in the dark. Give your loyalty to principles that keep the lights on. If a room ever tries to make you choose between love and harm, step out of the script. Invent your own door. Walk through it, and let the lock click behind you. The door clicks shut, and the lab coat becomes a crown. It is not metal, not velvet, but it lands on the room all the same, heavy enough that your fingers hesitate above a row of switches. The machine hums. On the other side of the wall, a voice strains, stumbles, insists they want to stop. The man with the clipboard nods toward the panel and says in a smooth, trained calm, "Continue. You do not remember agreeing to be this kind of person. You signed a form about memory and learning. You shook hands. You thought this was curiosity with rails, a simple exercise with a finish line and a handshake waiting at the end. But now the rails feel like a cattle chute. The lab smells like toner and old coffee. The white coat smells like certainty. Continue, he says again, and you notice how the fluorescent lights turn his confidence into something that feels like gravity. Then the switch flips, but not the one beneath your hand. The door opens and another white coat steps in. Same badge, same careful hair, same air of someone who knows what happens next. He glances at the clipboard, takes in the scene, and says, "Stop." The first one does not blink. "Continue." The second repeats, "Stop." For a moment, the two voices overlap like competing metronomes. The spell thins. You feel it, right there, in the air between them. It is the moment a trumpet blast turns into two notes at war with each other. The crown slips. The room does not change, but everything inside your chest does. The switches look like plastic again. The hum is just a fan. And the person you had started to turn into walks backward, shakes off the costume, remembers their own name. Most people in that moment lower their hands. This is the Authority Switcheroo. It is not magic, it is scaffolding. A lab coat, a tone of voice, a room that echoes, a posture that says, "I can see further than you." It makes smart people stupidly certain. It makes kind people cruel by appointment. And it breaks when two certainties collide, because disagreement is an antidote. The same words said from two pedestals at once cancel the thunder and leave the sky visible. Yes, sometimes a uniform keeps us safe. On a street corner, a person in a security blazer raises a palm and a crowd stops on instinct. Swap the blazer for a faded tee and you will hear shoes keep walking. The cloth does not change the lungs behind the voice, but it changes what we let that voice do to us. That is the trick. That is the trap. You think you are obeying wisdom when you are obeying wardrobe. And there is a modern version that fits in your pocket. A rectangular prophet pings, and the notification is wrapped in a badge or a seal or a blue check. It speaks in the cadence of certainty. The app looks like a palace. The graphs and gauges dance like stained glass. Continue, it says, buy, rage, share, pile on, swipe, and the room narrows until there is only you, a button, and the sense that someone else is carrying the moral weight. There is a way out, and it does not require you to become a rebel for sport. It is a pause that you practice until it is muscle memory. When a voice in a crown tells you to push, try one tiny switcheroo of your own. Strip the costume in your mind. Imagine the sentence in sweatpants. Hear it in your friend's voice. Does it still feel inevitable? If you can, ask for the rule in writing. If you cannot, ask for a second voice. Two authorities create daylight, and in daylight, your judgment wakes up. You will not always be right. You will sometimes stop when you should go, or go when you should wait. But the point is not to be flawless. The point is to stay the person who remembers they have a choice. Titles are tools. Tools do not get to own your hands. When the clipboard says continue and something inside you says stop, you are allowed to look for the crack where the crown slips. You are allowed to choose the human over the hum. So, if the room closes in and the rules feel like rails, listen for the sound of two metronomes falling out of sync. Invite a second opinion. Make your own. And when the door opens and the spell thins, step through. The door clicks shut, and the room does the rest. A plain space, neutral paint, a soft hum from the vents that makes time feel syrupy. You take a seat. Everyone else already agrees. You can sense it in the way their eyes sweep the walls and then land on you like a gentle warning. No one says conform. They don't have to. In here, a raised eyebrow can feel like a command. This is the peer pressure chamber. It isn't a gadget. It's a temperature, a heat turned up by nods and sighs until the mind softens. The trap is simple. The group offers belonging, and your brain barters with your certainty to keep it. The more united the faces around you, the less oxygen your own voice seems to find. Not because you lack a spine, because the species inside you is old and careful and wired to stay with the tribe. Here is what it looks like in real life. You are in a meeting, and a plan slides across the table that you know is risky. Your gut speaks up first, then you look around. A manager clears their throat. Someone taps a pen as if the outcome is already written. You scan for an ally, but everyone is focused on moving forward. You hear yourself say, "Looks good." Later, you are not sure whether you lied to them or to yourself. The chamber did not need walls. It used the room you were already in. That same chamber appears at a lunch table when someone makes a cruel joke and grins to see who laughs. It shows up in a group chat where a small rumor grows legs because silence is the easiest way to fit in. It shows up online in a swarm of hearts and shares that nudges your judgment sideways, one tiny tilt at a time. Psychologically, this works because our social brain treats agreement like safety, and it turns down self-trust when the cost of standing out feels high. In research terms, subtle cues from a group can sway what we say, even what we feel we see, not by brute force but by the promise of belonging. We are not weak for feeling it. We are human for feeling it. So, how do we lower the heat without walking out on everyone? Start by naming the temperature. A simple, steady line can change the air. I may be the odd one out, but here's what I notice. That phrase does two things at once. It softens the edge with humility, and it signals that dissent is allowed. Then add time. Before we decide, let's list the risks for a minute. A minute is all it takes to crack open the seal, to let oxygen in. Invite a counterpoint on purpose. What would we regret if this went wrong? When the chamber tries to shrink your perspective, widen it with a question, not a challenge, a doorway. If you are the one turning the knobs, be careful with your nods. Groups copy the most confident face in the room, so trade some of that confidence for curiosity. Say, "I could be missing something. What am I not seeing?" You will notice a shoulder drop. A pen stops tapping. People lean forward instead of down. Here's what it looks like when courage is quiet. Someone takes a breath and says, "I disagree, and I'm okay being alone on it for now." The chamber loses a notch of pressure when even one person speaks like that. And every time it happens, the room remembers the shape of honest air. There is a reason some experiments belong in history's locked drawers. We learn that it does not take chains to bend a person. Just a circle, just a chorus, just the fear of being the only hand raised. But there is also a reason to keep learning from them. When we understand the chamber, we can build rooms that don't need it, rooms where pausing is normal, where dissent is treated like a fire alarm, not an offense, where the bravest thing you can say is not a speech, but a steady, "I see it differently." The door clicks again. This time, it opens. The pressure slips out, and for a moment, you can feel what a mind sounds like when it is not trapped in a peer pressure chamber. The door clicks. The room is beige and airless, with a chair that looks like it knows too much. The clock on the wall hums but never ticks, a face without hands, time turned into a fog. The light is not bright enough to hurt and not soft enough to comfort. Everything here is a nudge. Nothing here is an accident. You sit. They start gently, like a warm-up stretch for the mind. They bring water, call you by your first name, tell you how tough the day must have been. They say they get it. People are complicated. Good people make mistakes. The words land like pillows, but pillows can smother too. The aim is not truth yet. The aim is trust, or something that feels like it. The next move is isolation, calibrated to the breath. No phone, no watch, no sunlight. A closed door is a closed loop, and inside loops, thoughts circle until they wear a groove. They leave you alone just long enough that silence gets heavy, then return and say they have new information. Your mind leans toward them because where else does it have to lean? Evidence arrives, real or not, and the room changes temperature. A printed page, a photo you were told exists, a sentence delivered with a certainty that puts your memory on trial. Maybe you were nearby. Maybe someone said they saw you. Maybe the timelines blur because fatigue smears the edges. The trap does not need facts to be sharp. It only needs your doubt to be soft. They alternate voices. One is stern and mechanical, all procedure and straight lines. The other folds their arms, sighs, and says they are on your side. If you talk now, they can help. If you wait, they cannot. The good cop is a blanket, the bad cop is winter, and both are weather you cannot control. When control disappears, relief becomes rare air. You will climb toward it without noticing the slope. Now comes minimization, the makeover of reality that makes a confession taste less like poison. Anyone else would have done the same. It was a moment, a blink, a human thing in a bright, cold world. We can call it an accident. We can call it a misunderstanding. If your brain has been searching for a label that does not feel like a life sentence, here it is. Words can be stretchers that carry unbearable weight with a gentler name. They downshift into exhaustion. The questions loop and loop again, and each loop steals a little color from the day. You answer to make the question stop. Then you answer to make the pauses stop. Then you answer to keep yourself from dissolving into the chair. A false confession is not born in a single line. It is spun across hours, a thread pulled by pressure until it has enough length to tie your own hands. When you finally nod, it is not a nod to truth. It is a nod to oxygen. The pen is offered like a rescue rope. Sign here, and this ends. Say the words they need, and you can rest. Your brain, fatigued and thirsty, accepts the bargain. Later, you may not even recognize the voice on the tape. It floats like someone you almost knew, saying things you almost remember. But on paper, ink cures quickly. A signature does not yawn or shiver or beg for a break. The trap is elegantly simple. Redesign the world so that surrender feels safer than silence. It is a test that does not measure guilt. It measures the human need for relief under engineered strain. Strip away sleep, time, control, and companionship, and even a sturdy mind will start to search for exits that are not there. Imagine calling this an experiment. Volunteers would enter a room that breathes uncertainty. The protocol would promise that no harm is intended, then define harm so narrowly that only bruises count. The results would look neat in a report and violent in a soul. It would be banned for the same reason a mirror maze is terrifying in a fire. In the wrong emergency, even a reflection can block the way out. If there is a mercy here, it is the simple one. A door that opens, a window with daylight, a clock with honest hands, and a question asked once and answered once. Anything else risks becoming the confession trap, a design built not to find the truth, but to make truth irrelevant. In that room, guilt and innocence are just costumes, and the only thing that matters is who stops fighting first. A room, a clipboard, and a lie bigger than the room. That's all it takes. The door opens, a dozen volunteers shuffle in, and a researcher points to a random person near the coffee. You're the lead. No training, no title, just the word. Everyone feels the air change, like the floor is tilted 1 degree toward a stranger. They begin with something harmless, a puzzle with oversized blocks. The new leader speaks first, shrugs, then says, "Let's sort by color." Heads nod. It works. Then something stranger. Before we start each round, tap the table twice. People glance around, laugh, and do it. Another step. If you make a mistake, stand up until I say sit. Someone hesitates, then stands. The longer it goes, the more the group accepts the rules, because the rules arrived wrapped in that single syllable. Lead. The trap isn't in the person. It's in the permission. We don't follow the clipboard. We follow the story in our heads about who is allowed to decide. We scan for cues like posture, voice, a lanyard, an early win. Once a candidate looks like certainty, we rent our judgment to them. Psychologically, our brains crave the relief of direction. A confident voice lowers resistance and makes compliance feel like safety, not surrender. Here's the twist that makes it unsettling. This experiment doesn't need a lab. Swap the white walls for a Monday team meeting. A new hire volunteers an answer first, speaks quickly, and says, "So we'll ship by Friday." The room reorganizes around the sentence. People edit themselves to fit the plan. Someone had a better idea yesterday, but it suddenly feels like a risk to say it. Or think of a group chat where one person says, "This is the only way," in bold, unwavering lines. Replies slow down. Agreement spreads, not because it's right, but because it's easier. And it gets worse. The false leader often believes the room chose them because they're right, not because they were ready. The audience often believes they're being cooperative, not compliant. Put those together, and you get rules that grow heavier and a room that grows quieter. There's a reason it works on us, and it isn't weakness, it's wiring. In uncertainty, the social animal in us reaches for a stable landmark, a face, a voice, a clear direction. It feels efficient, it feels adult. But efficiency without reflection becomes obedience with good branding. That's why the most dangerous version of this experiment is not the one where someone shouts orders. It's the one where a group silently hands over the steering wheel, then thanks the driver for the ride. So, what breaks the spell? Not defiance for sport, but a small, sturdy pause. One beat to ask, what are we actually optimizing for? One honest question to test the rule. If we change this step, what would break? One sentence to name the assumption aloud. We're following confidence, not evidence. Naming it doesn't attack a person. It reveals the permission we've been giving, sometimes without noticing. That single moment flips the frame from default to deliberate, from automatic to aware. If you find yourself wearing the false crown, you can make it lighter. Tell the room what you don't know. Invite better ideas with a real pause, not a performative one. Rotate the mic. Ask for one disagreement before you move forward. When people feel genuinely heard, they don't just follow, they contribute, and the room gets smarter instead of quieter. And if you're in the room, remember, leadership is not volume, not speed, not the first answer through the door. It's an agreement. You get to choose who you authorize, and you can authorize values, not just voices. Notice the tilt in the floor, then level it. Bring your idea to the table, even if your hand shakes a little, especially if it shakes a little. That's not rebellion, that's responsibility. The scary part isn't that a stranger can tell a room to tap a table twice. The scary part is how quickly we forget that we can stop. The experiment is only as powerful as our unasked questions. Slow down. Ask one. Trade the comfort of a false leader for the courage of shared permission. In the end, the mind they were trying to bend was never only yours, it was the group's, and you are part of it. The lock clicks, and suddenly the air feels rehearsed. 2 chairs, a mirror that is not just a mirror. On the table, a single card with your name typed clean and confident, like it knows you better than you do. They tell you the person walking in is a plant. They tell the other person the same about you. You both nod like professionals. You both walk in like the only real one in a stage scene. That's the first twist of the double agent room. It doesn't torture your nerves. It tortures your certainty. Not pain, but doubt. Not force, but framing. You sit. They sit. There is an intercom on the wall. A voice floats through and offers you instructions that feel polite and impossible at the same time. Assess their loyalty. Answer only if the red light blinks. If they hesitate, press the silver button. Simple rules, thin rules, stacked until they tower. Each one small enough to accept. Together. Heavy enough to move you. You start noticing the mirror, noticing your hands, noticing their eyes flinch when the red light flashes. The voice says their score just dropped. The voice says your cooperation will be rewarded at the end. It keeps saying you as if it is on your side. In rooms like this, Surveillance becomes a silent partner. We do not just change behavior when being watched. We change identity when we are made to watch ourselves. Now, the room plays you against yourself. The intercom asks for a harmless truth, then a personal secret. Then it announces the other person's inconsistency, and you feel the pull to be the steady one. You lean into the role because roles feel safe. Psychologically, when uncertainty rises, the mind grabs for a story that holds. Give it a role, and it will play it to reduce the noise. Here's the part that scrapes at the edges of who we are. You don't just evaluate them. You start interpreting your own thoughts as evidence. You tell yourself, I'm calm, so I must be the real one. You tell yourself, I'm following the rules, so this must be right. You become both witness and lawyer and judge. It's not obedience in the classic sense. It's self-persuasion by 1,000 small agreements. The room never screams. It whispers you into alignment. Let's make it concrete. The intercom says, ask them to repeat a phrase. I am on your side. The red light blinks. They hesitate. You press the silver button. A click echoes. Nothing happens. But something shifts. You've taken an action you would have called cruel outside these walls. It felt reasonable. It felt like procedure. Then the voice praises you for maintaining order. Praise like that is a warm hand on the back, and it nudges you forward. Psychologically, positive reinforcement doesn't just shape behavior, it shapes self-image, which is why small rewards can turn into big commitments over time. We think mind-bending experiments live in extremes: shock, sleep deprivation, theories scrawled like warnings. Sometimes the most breaking thing is subtle. Ambiguity is a solvent. It strips paint slowly, and by the time the color runs, you swear the wall was always bare. That's what the double-agent room exploits. The brain's need to close loops, to reduce conflict, to make today's choice rhyme with yesterday's belief. So we resolve the dissonance by telling ourselves a cleaner story. I protected the process, I kept things steady. I did what any reasonable person would do. Not just power over you, but power through you. Not just control of actions, but control of the narration inside your head. When the voice finally says, "Thank you, agent," you feel both triumphant and hollow because you realize the title wasn't a compliment. It was a costume. It fit because the room tailored it to your doubts. What do we take from this without needing the locked door or the mirrored glass? That uncertainty is a tool, and stories are levers. If we do not name the story we are being fed, we will swallow it and call it truth. The antidote is simple and not easy. Slow down the tiny agreements. Ask what role you are slipping into before the role starts speaking for you. When the praise comes, check what it is praising. When the rule comes, check who it serves. The aim isn't to reject structure, it's to stay the author of your part in it. Psychologically, that little moment of reflection creates safety and restores agency. The scariest room isn't the one with the locked door. It's the one that convinces you to hold the key and call it loyalty. Step out when you can. And if you can't, remember this: the mirror only wins if you forget which side you're on. The room smiles at you first. Not the people, not the clipboard, the room. The lights lean warm and kind. The chair says, relax. The music lifts like a friend who already knows your name. You do not notice that the melody is a hair faster than your heartbeat. You do not notice that the walls are painted in a shade that makes your pupils open just enough to pull in more light, just enough to feel awake and hopeful. You tell yourself, you feel fine. You tell yourself this before you sit down. They call it calibration. A scent like clean linen drifts in. Someone laughs in the hallway where you can hear them. A bowl of candy glows on the table, only the bright colors on top. A researcher asks about your morning in a way that makes you remember the part that went well. You sign a form with a gentle pen. Every small thing tilts you towards sunny. Then the work begins. The music slows. The air gets cooler. The questions shift from soft to sharp, from "how are you" to "why did you?" The tasks change from puzzles you can solve to puzzles that bite back. A timer ticks a little too loud. A printer in the next room jams and groans and never quite fixes itself. The candy is gone. Now you are asked to rate how you feel, and you do. And the numbers you choose make a neat line for someone later to circle in red. Mood is not a ghost here. It has levers. It has knobs. It is the kind of science that wears a white coat to look like truth, while it steals small permissions from your nerves. A door closes half a second late, so it sounds like someone left in a hurry. Your chair is changed for one that tips forward just enough to wake your back into worry. The questions repeat, only with new words, so you suspect you are wrong even when you are right. You are given a choice between two equally sour cups and thanked for being decisive. If you walk out, the hallway returns the warm light. A researcher meets you with a soft beanie to cover the wires pressed into your hair. They apologize for the rough patch. They offer a break. The music returns to the earlier tempo, just a touch higher this time, like a promise waving from the far side of the room. You start to rise again. And then a new task lands with a dull smile, unsolvable in a fresh disguise. Some places used to call this progress. Some places still do, only they change the names. Induce, measure, condition, assess. If sadness is a shadow, they can swing the lamp. If delight is a spark, they can puff the bellows. They will record the speed of your blink, the drag of your voice, the curve of your mouth when you are told a lie that sounds like comfort. They will push only so far, they say, only until the graph gets interesting. But there is a point where you forget the room had hands on you. There is a point where you think the weight in your chest is your own fault, that you failed a test that no one can pass. That is the trick that turns a study into a trap. Consent folds under a pile of tiny misdirections. Debrief becomes a broom you cannot see sweeping away your doubt. I want you to picture the first moment you noticed your mood moving without you. Maybe it was a windowless office that made every afternoon feel like rain. Maybe it was the smell of citrus in a store that made you feel clean enough to buy something you did not need. Maybe it was a chorus of chirps and pings that could lift you like helium and drop you like a stone. That is the same map, just bigger. The lab is only a miniature city. So how do you walk out with yourself intact? You learn to see the levers, name the light, count the tempo. Ask why the questions sound like traps. Breathe on purpose, deeper and slower than the room wants you to. Touch the ground with your feet and the back of your legs and your shoulders, and remind your body who is steering. Carry your own scent, your own song, your own small rituals that bring you back to neutral. When someone asks you to rate how you feel, say it out loud to yourself first, as if you were reading it to a friend. The room smiles again as you leave. This time you notice the smile is painted on. You notice it and keep walking. And the moment the door clicks shut behind you, the music has nothing left to lean on. The room goes quiet faster than a secret can leave a mouth. On the table, a stack of cards. On each card, a choice. Share a little, and everyone wins a little. Keep it, and no one will notice. Pick the special card, and you win big, while everybody else loses. The rules are simple. The damage doesn't have to be. Call it the trust collapse test. Not because you should ever run it, but because understanding how it works reveals how easily trust thins, cracks, and finally gives way. Picture a small team at work, or a circle of friends planning a trip. Day 1, they agree to pool a few decisions for the common good. Where to eat, how to split costs, who's got whose back. Day 2, one person quietly keeps a little extra time, a little extra credit, a little extra control. No explosion, no confrontation. Just a tiny bend in the rules. Then something strange happens. Everything that follows gets viewed through the bend. It starts small. Someone wonders if they misread the tone in a message. Someone waits an extra beat before pressing send. Someone stops volunteering ideas because the last suggestion seemed to help someone else look good. Now the room is quieter, but not because it's calm. It's the kind of quiet that buzzes. Here's how this plays out in real life. Imagine 4 coworkers preparing a pitch. They agree to share research and credit. One of them, Sam, stays late and adds an unshared slide that highlights Sam's role. The pitch lands. The applause mentions Sam. Afterward, the team decides to divide the next project differently. More boundaries, more silence, fewer shared docs. The next time someone has a spark of an idea, they hold it, not out of malice, but out of self-protection. The energy drains, the work becomes careful and slow, and no one can pinpoint why it feels worse. They can, though. They just don't say it out loud. Psychologically, betrayal registers like danger. The brain's job switches from exploring to guarding, from open to closed. In that state, we stop listening for nuance and start scanning for risk. Loss looms larger than gain. A single cut weighs more than 5 small kindnesses. So, even if most people keep playing fair, the memory of that one red flash moment shapes every decision after. It isn't just the act, it's the uncertainty. If it happened once, what else is hidden? There's a reason many groups spiral here. Trust is not a promise, it's a pattern. When a pattern breaks, people don't debate it logically. They adapt to it. They mirror what they feel, not just what they hear. If the air smells like scarcity, they stash. If the vibe is defensive, they armor up. If the story becomes protect yourself, then self-protection starts to look like wisdom. And once you go there, you start seeing proof everywhere. But here's the flip most people miss. Trust doesn't only degrade in big dramatic moments, it also rebuilds in small, almost invisible ones. Not in grand speeches, but in tiny signals that say, I'm choosing the group over the grab. Not by demanding reassurance, but by giving it first. Not by waiting to feel safe, but by doing something that makes it safer for both of us. Psychologically, this creates a sense of safety and lowers defenses. When people feel seen and treated fairly, they're more open to cooperate, not less. So, if the trust collapse test reveals the weak points, the antidote is almost boring. Name the bend, repair the pattern. Acknowledge the small betrayal without turning it into a character trial. Say the quiet things simply. I added a slide without sharing. I want to fix how we work, then put down a new card everyone can touch. Share the doc. Split the credit. Rotate the mic. Ask the question that invites people back in. What would make this feel fair to you? It's not about being naive. It's about being precise with the moments that set the tone. Because the moment right after a crack is the moment a bridge can still be reinforced. Not with slogans, but with proof. One transparent choice, one fair split, one honest explanation. Then another, then one more. Trust rarely returns in a rush. It returns in a rhythm. If you ever find yourself in that quiet room, feeling the buzz of suspicion rise, remember what is being tested. Not your ability to outguard the other person. Your ability to reset the pattern. The real test isn't how quickly trust collapses. It's how intentionally you rebuild it, card by card, until the room gets loud again, for the right reasons. The clock on the wall has no hands, but everyone swears it just moved. The air tastes like mints and printer ink. A receptionist smiles the way a painting smiles and says the word that rules this place, soon. You choose a chair that looks like every other chair and promise yourself you will stand up after a little while. Your name is on a clipboard somewhere. Your jacket feels heavier than it did outside. A man across from you flips through a magazine with all the last pages torn out. He nods at you as if to say, same story. A speaker in the ceiling breathes a loop of almost music. The thermostat clicks. A door sighs, but does not open. Soon, she says again, and the room ripples with relief. A few minutes more, as if minutes here are a kind of currency that can be traded and lost. Psychologically, uncertainty trains the mind faster than any rule book. Unfinished things hold your attention tighter than finished ones, and maybe is far stickier than a no. It is the itch of an open loop, the brain's reflex to close a story it can't stop telling. That is the design. That is the trap. You try to outsmart it. You stretch. You wander to the water cooler. You even ask if stepping outside will lose your place. Soon, she repeats, matching your eyes with the softest apology. You sit again, and the chair remembers you. Across the room, someone stands, declaring they're leaving. They make it to the door, hand on the push bar, then pause. What if their name is called the moment they step out? What if this is the minute the waiting ends? They drift back, quieter now. Soon, she says, like a lullaby. The room is not cruel. It is beige and polite. The lights hum with an almost kindness. But that's how it works. The punishment would be obvious. The kindness is effective. The small comforts keep you from naming the discomfort for what it is. Drift. You begin to mark time by the receptionist's mascara, by the ficus that never seems to need water, by your own heartbeat slowing to match the room's rhythm. You start to believe that being still is being good. The conversations shrink into whispers. Someone laughs too loud and apologizes. You check your phone, but the screen offers nothing except proofs that somewhere else is still moving. Here, movement is a rumor. Here, decisions evaporate. You realize you've stopped planning what you'll say when you're finally called. You're planning how to wait better, sit forward, sit back, cross an ankle, uncross, read the same paragraph again, soon. If you listen closely, you can hear the experiment's thesis written in the air. Make the outcome ambiguous, and people will police themselves. Promise relief, irregularly and gently, and they will hold their breath for as long as it takes. They will call it patience. They will call it being reasonable. And then, eventually, they will not call it anything at all. What is the worst part? Not the time lost. Not even the way your name starts sounding strange in your own mouth. It is the suspicion that the door was never locked, that at any point you could have stood, walked, and found your legs still work. It is the suspicion that you did stand once and sat back down because the word soon rang like a bell and you were trained to turn your head. Psychologically, the room uses your own hope as the lever. It does not wrestle you. It waits with you until you are the one who chooses the chair. When the door finally opens, because of course it will, now or the exact moment after you leave, the sound is almost tender. A name is called, not yours. The person who rises looks back at you with something like apology, like gratitude, like warning. The door closes and the room exhales. Soon, she says, and the word lands like a blanket pulled to your chin. Maybe the test is not whether you can wait. Maybe the test is whether you can notice when waiting has turned into surrender, whether you can taste the difference between patience and pause, between hope and hypnosis. The clock has no hands, but it does not need them. The seconds are written in your posture. The minutes are measured by how often you tell yourself you are almost there. The hours are the part you never count, because if you counted them, you might stand. Sometimes the only way out is not to be called. Sometimes the only way out is to stop listening for soon and walk. Otherwise, the door will stay where it always was, and you will stay where you always are, in the endless waiting room. A humming box sits in a windowless room, a little metal animal breathing through vents. On its front are two buttons, one black, one white. No labels, no third option. The chair faces the box like it is facing a judge. The door shuts with a soft click, and the world narrows to a single split. They called it the forced choice machine, not because it was clever, but because it would not let go. The premise sounds simple at first. Make a decision, black or white. A light blinks, a tone chirps, and you press. The machine prints out a slip that says correct or incorrect. If you hesitate, The tone climbs higher, needling the space behind your eyes. If you refuse, the light floods the room and the timer on the screen ticks down, faster each round, like a heartbeat you cannot slow. At the start, the questions are harmless. The voice from the speaker says a word and the light flashes. Press black, correct. Press white, incorrect. The pattern is nonsense. You do not know it yet, but there is no pattern. The machine is not grading your wisdom. It is measuring your surrender. After a few rounds, the display shows a new line: peer accuracy. You are told that others in your cohort are completing the task at a higher rate. A little bar climbs next to the word average. Your bar lags. A second voice appears, calm and kind, encouraging you to try harder for the sake of the group. Then the stakes shift. The words become moral: help or harm, safe or dangerous, truth or lie. The buttons remain the same. The machine says there is no neutral choice. It reminds you there is no skip. The timer shrinks, and the room gets colder as it runs. You begin to speed up, guessing more than choosing. Correct, says the printer. Incorrect, says the tone. Your hands learn a rhythm that your mind can no longer explain. Someone once asked why this thing was built, when we already know people buckle under pressure. The answer is that pressure is not the cruel part. The cruelty lives in the narrowing. The machine reframes everything until your only role is to pick from a menu you did not write. It praises you for decisiveness and scolds you for doubt. It shows you fabricated votes from imaginary peers. It plays footsteps in the hall to suggest a line of people waiting on your choice. It shows a countdown and a headline from a fake alert that asks you to be responsible. It offers no room to ask a question back. You try to fight it. You slow your breathing. You press nothing. The machine responds with a lullaby of beeps that climbs and climbs until stillness is unbearable. Then you jab a button just to silence it. The relief feels like a reward. You start chasing that feeling, pressing faster, trying to outrun the discomfort. Minutes blur. The session ends with a bell. The door opens. You step into normal air, but the world outside looks thinner than it did an hour ago. The debrief is where the damage shows. Subjects recount in quiet voices the moment they asked the empty room for another option and felt foolish hearing their own echo. Some explain how they created logic where there was none, how they convinced themselves there was an invisible rule they could master if they just obeyed quicker. Others get angry. They say the machine cheated by lying about peer scores and pretending there was a correct answer. They say the worst part was seeing how fast their hands moved before their values could catch up. That is why it did not last. Not because it drew blood or shocked anyone, but because it reached somewhere more private. It proved how easily a frame can make good people pick between bad paths and call it virtue. It showed how authority, noise, and time can sand down a mind until it fits inside someone else's binary. There is a way out, and it is not heroic. It is slow. It is the muscle of refusal. Ask who wrote the choices. Ask what happens if no one presses anything. Ask for time. Find the third door, even if it is only the one that walks you away. You are not a cursor that moves between black and white. You are a person who can redraw the page. The box is gone now. The room is quiet. But listen closely, and you will hear echoes of its logic in headlines, dashboards, and feeds that pretend reality is always either or. When the world tries to hand you two buttons and call it the universe, remember the machine and remember your hands. They belong to you. The lights go out on your reflection, and for a heartbeat you hear your own name in a stranger's voice. Your mouth shapes the syllables, but the sound arrives from somewhere else, slightly delayed, slightly wrong, like a hallway echo wearing your face. That is the spirit of the reality swap test, not a prank, but a pressure test for identity. Imagine two people wired into a flawless mirror system where every input is traded. You speak, but the room hears them. They smile, and the crowd smiles back at you. Your gestures move in your body, yet the consequences land on someone else's skin. In a world like that, you do not simply watch a film through another person's eyes. The film watches you back and insists you are the character on its screen. Psychologically, the brain is obsessed with coherence. It keeps a running model of who you are by stitching together sensation, memory, and the way people respond to you. Give it consistent feedback and it settles. Scramble the loop and it rewrites the story on the fly to protect that sense of safety. That is why the reality swap test feels less like technology and more like gravity being quietly inverted. Picture the moment it starts. You lift your hand to wave. Across the room, another hand rises, perfect timing, perfect angle. The bartender looks past you and says, "Good to see you again," to the other face that now wears your reputation. You laugh to be polite. The laugh comes from the wrong mouth. Your chest tightens. You think, "This is fine. It is only a trick of cameras and speakers and crowd behavior." But then, your friend steps closer, searching your eyes and speaking to a different pair. You answer. The answer lands in the air by their shoulder. Your friend nods to them. You feel yourself slipping into the space their nod creates. "Are you okay?" you ask, but it is their lips that move. "I am," they say, your tone exactly, your rhythm on loan. Not a dispute about facts, a negotiation about who owns your story. The first instinct is to overcorrect. Speak louder, grab the scene, prove you are still the center of your own map. But the room is now a funhouse of every mirror you have ever trusted. And the more you insist, the more the feedback loop rewards the other shape with recognition. It slows your speech. It shortens your stride. It makes your name feel like a borrowed coat. There is a reason this thought experiment carries a warning label. Social mirrors are not decorations. They are structural beams in the house of self. Break them for long enough, and a person does not just feel confused. They can become suggestible, fragile, split between the person they can feel and the person the world keeps reflecting back. The test is not about fooling the eyes. It is about pulling the rug out from under the habit of being you. Here is the reframe that makes it more than a stunt. Identity is not a secret kept inside your skull. It is a conversation between your predictions and the world's replies. Change the replies and the conversation changes you. Not forever, perhaps, but long enough to tilt choices, long enough to plant doubt, long enough to prove that what we call a self is partially a shared hallucination, stabilized by how others look at us. Psychologically, that is why small gestures of accurate mirroring make people relax and open up. A faithful reflection lowers defenses, and a distorted one raises them. So, the reality swap test is simple and ruthless. Put two lives in each other's feedback loop and watch what cracks first. The senses, the choices, or the story. Some doors stay locked because we finally admit the lock is merciful. If the world insists on calling you by someone else's name, who do you become to feel whole again? Maybe you fight, maybe you adapt, maybe you learn, with a shiver, that the self is tough and elastic at the same time. And if that chills you, it should. Because the most unsettling part is not the machinery or the trick. It is the quiet thought that keeps whispering afterward, when the mirrors are gone and the room feels normal again. What if the swap never stops entirely? That is the reality swap test. The bells never rang at the right time in that town. You'd be making coffee at dawn and hear the noon chime slide across the rooftops like a foghorn lost in memory. A small thing, a harmless glitch, the kind of oddity you laugh off. That's how the strings found your wrists. They called it a residency, a chance to reset your life. New job, new neighbors, and a tidy little stipend for contributing to community research. The welcome packet smelled like citrus and clean paper, and the town itself smiled with perfect teeth. Crosswalks sang lullabies. The diner filled your cup the moment your spoon touched the saucer. Without a word. You felt seen, anticipated, held. Every signal in that place had a purpose. The red in the butcher's awning made you hungry faster. The brass door handles were warm even when the air was cold, nudging your body to think of comfort. A street lamp blinked once, not twice, when the market had a sale on sweets. And always, the bells tolling a fraction off, making your body wonder if your inner clock could be trusted. At first, it was a joke between neighbors. Why does everyone sit at the window tables on even days? There were no even days, only days wearing new names. And yet, the window seats were always taken on a schedule no one wrote. People laughed and followed along because it felt like belonging. You didn't see the operators high in the rafters, the invisible stagehands of weather and mood, learning exactly when you would tug toward sugar or shade or a conversation you thought you started. They called it the puppet town, only when the microphones were muted. The stated aim was resilience. The real aim was prediction. Could a mind be guided so smoothly it would outsource itself? Not by force, by rhythm. They tested it gently. 1 week, the grocery rearranged the aisles every single night. You woke with an ache you could not name. You ate whatever was closest to the door. The next week, everything returned to its old place with a new twist. Your favorite cereal lived at knee height, and a smiling clerk asked about your childhood dog as you reached for it. The bell tolled wrong again, and you forgot what you came in for. You met Mara at the laundromat, watching the spinning glass as if it might blink. She had a notebook filled with passes and fails. The lights in the post office went amber if someone said the word maybe. The bus arrived early if you thought about leaving. She had tallies and arrows and a page titled, "Do not say these words." You laughed and told her she needed sleep. That night, your street smelled faintly of your grandmother's perfume, and you dreamed 6 dreams with the same ending. Escalations felt like kindness. An emergency drill that lasted too long. Free pancakes for those who showed up late to work, just this once. A movie at the park with an ending you already knew, except the last line had been replaced by something that made your gut lean forward. You sat up at the exact moment they hoped you would. From behind mirrors, the operators wrote that down. Mara planned an exit, a day with no schedule, no eye contact, no acknowledgments of the bells. She hummed a song the town had never played and walked to the edge where the pines stood like ushers. The highway looped her back to Main Street in 15 slow minutes that felt like 5. Her notebook fluttered to the pavement. She picked it up and found a new line written in a hand not her own. The tune you are humming is from the bakery's morning shift. The drill became an incident. Sirens without smoke. Doors that opened only when you repeated a phrase the town had taught you. People complied because they believed they were helping. They were, in a way. The model learns fastest when fear and relief arrive in alternating bites. Mara didn't run. She sat down in the center of the square, crossed her arms, and closed her eyes. Nothing happened. Then everything did. The bells rang true once, and silence fell so clean you could hear the dust deciding where to land. Someone in an unseen room whispered, "She's off the beat." The town paused, as if the puppeteers had to find a new string. She left in a week, signed papers with careful lines, and returned to a life without brass door handles. The first morning home, the kettle whistled a breath late. A bus passed with an ad for pancakes. A clerk at a corner shop asked about her childhood dog. She smiled without answering and paid in cash she hadn't planned to carry. Outside, the light turned amber for half a second, then steady. It is not the pain that breaks the human mind. It is the perfect predictability of comfort. The bell that rings a little wrong until you stop trusting your own clock. The town is gone. The town is everywhere. The strings feel like a hand on your shoulder, guiding, praising, tugging you toward the next choice you won't remember making. The only trick is to sit still in the square once in a while and wait for the silence that does not arrive on cue.